Prologue. I ran. My pursuer was a single wild animal, but all I could do was run. Terror flooded my heart. I took to the stairs running, zipped through the garden, and used magic to scale the roof, stumbling all the way. Where did he go? The creature's terrifying voice rang out as it chased me relentlessly. I thought I had some stamina. After all, I had been running long distances and practicing swordplay for the past few years. Now that my confidence had been shattered, the creature seemed to be laughing at me, its crimson hair fluttering as it pursued me so closely that I couldn't stop for air. Don't give up, I told myself. No matter how much distance I put between us, it would catch up the moment I started to lose focus. Huff, huff. I was out of breath. I couldn't run any further. I couldn't escape it. The only option left was to hide. I groaned and ducked into the shadow of the stairs, behind a decorative plant. The creature's booming voice echoed throughout the manor. I will never forgive you. Those words made my legs tremble. My name is Rudeus Greyrat. I am 7 years old. Currently a handsome boy with bright brown hair and rosy cheeks. In my previous life, I was an unemployed 34-year-old virgin. A shut-in. In that life, I skipped my parents' funeral, which got me kicked out of the house. Left in a state of despair, I was run over by a truck and died. But by some trick of fate, I was reincarnated as a baby with my memories still intact. I was little better than garbage before I died, but having seen the error of my ways, I've worked hard to live a proper life for the past 7 years. I've learned the language here, studied magic, and practiced swordplay. I have a good relationship with my new parents, and even made a cute, childhood friend by the name of Sylphiette. But in order for Sylphiette and me to attend the same school, I said I would work to earn the money for our tuition, so my father shipped me here to the citadel of Roa. I'm supposed to spend 5 years here, attending to the studies of my employer, the young Mistress, in return for her financial support. And that's the story so far. Come out here. I'm going to pulverize you. The creature's words struck fear into me as I hid in the shadows. I was terrified of this personification of rage, manifested in the form of a tiny female body. What happened, you ask? Let's go back an hour ago to find the answer. Chapter 1. The Young Mistress's Violence. It was evening when I arrived in the city of Roa. Buena Village and the city of Roa are a day's coach ride apart, a journey of 6 to 7 hours. Just the right distance, neither too near nor too far. Roa is a lively city, one of the largest in this area. The first thing that caught my eye were the citadel's walls. Sturdy walls, 7 to 8 meters tall, that wrapped around the city. Horse-drawn carriages came and went through the gigantic gate. As our coach passed through it, I saw lines of merchant stalls. The first thing that greeted me inside the city was a horse stable and an inn. A crowd of people bustled to and fro, merchants, townspeople, and even armor-clad warriors. It was truly like something out of a fantasy novel. I glanced at what seemed like a waiting station, where people sat with large amounts of luggage. What's that about? I wondered. Ghislaine, do you know what that is? I asked the person with me. She had ears and a tail like an animal, with dark brown skin that her sparse leather armor showed in wide swathes. She was a tall and muscular swordswoman. There were 7 tiers in the sword god style, and Ghislaine de Doldia was third from the top, with such impressive skills that she was known as a sword king. She would be the one teaching me the art of the sword. She was like a second master to me. You. She turned irritably toward me. Are you trying to make fun of me? She scowled ferociously, and I jumped. No, I wondered what that was. I didn't know, so I hoped you would tell me. Oh, sorry. That's what you meant. She saw that I was on the verge of tears and hurried to explain. That's the waiting area for the stagecoach. It's what people normally use to travel between cities. The other option is paying a peddler for a ride. As the coach went on, Ghislaine continued pointing out each place and explained it to me. That's the weaponsmithy. That's the pub. That's one branch of the Adventurers Guild, and that place is better left unvisited. Ghislaine had a stern face, but she was kind. The atmosphere changed as we passed one street corner. There were lines of stores aimed at adventurers, a weaponsmithy, and an armor smithy, and farther within, lines of shops for the townspeople. Residential homes were nestled deep in the alleyways. If you thought about it, intruders would have to attack the city from the outside in. It was obvious then that the city was constructed such that the deeper you went inward, the bigger the houses became and the more luxurious the goods shops offered. The closer you lived to the center, the richer you were. A gigantic building was nestled right in the middle of the city. That is the Liege Lord's Manor, Ghislaine said. It looks more like a castle than a manor. Well, this is a fortified city after all. Roa was an ancient city with a noble past. 400 years ago, it was the last bastion of defense in the war against the demon race. That was why there was a castle in the city's center. That said, despite its mighty origin story, the nobles of the imperial capital currently saw Roa as nothing more than a crude backwater full of adventurers. The fact that we came here must mean that the young mistress I'm to teach is of high social status. Ghislaine shook her head. Not quite. There was the Lord's Manor right before us. By my reckoning, The only people who lived here had to be people of high social rank. Was my theory wrong? As soon as I began wondering, the coachman gave a small nod to the gatekeeper of the Lord's manor. So, she must be the Lord's daughter. No, she's not. Not quite. I felt like there was some hidden meaning behind her words. What could it be? The carriage came to a stop. When we entered the manor, a butler led us to what looked to be a reception room. We were pointed to 2 sofas lined up together. This would be my first interview ever. I had to play it cool. Please take a seat there. While I took a seat upon the sofa, Ghislaine silently drew away and stood watch in the corner of the room. I bet she picked that spot so she could survey the entire room, I thought. In my previous life, I would have pegged her for a middle school nerd that watched too much anime. The young master should be returning shortly. Please wait here until he does. The butler poured what I guessed to be tea into an expensive-looking cup. Then he retreated and stood by the entrance to the room. I took a sip of the steaming drink. Not bad. I wasn't particularly well-versed in teas, but it seemed like the expensive sort. Since the man didn't pour any for Ghislaine, it was clear that I was the only one being treated like a guest. Where is he? A voice boomed from outside the room, accompanied by angry, thunderous footsteps. In here, the doors burst open violently, and a buff, muscular man entered the room. He had to be about 50. Despite the peppering of white in his dark brown hair, he looked in the prime of his life. I put the cup down, stood, and bowed deeply. It's nice to meet you. My name is Rudeus Greyrat. His nostrils flared. Humph. You don't even know how to introduce yourself. Master, Lord Rudeus has never been outside Buena Village. He is still young. I am sure he has not yet had the time to learn proper manners. Surely you can overlook a bit of his. And you, shut up. That rebuke silenced the butler immediately. If this were the master of the house, that meant he was my employer, right? He certainly was angry. There must have been something about me he found lacking. I tried to be as polite as I could when I introduced myself, but perhaps the etiquette of nobles was different here. Humph. So I guess Paul didn't even see fit to teach his own son manners. I've been told my father detests formality, which is why he left his father's house. I suspect that's also why he didn't teach me any of it. Already with the excuses. You're just like him. Did my father really make that many excuses? Yes. An excuse every time he opened his mouth. If he wet the bed, an excuse. If he got into a fight, an excuse. If he played hooky, an excuse. He was really going off about this. Even you. If you wanted to learn manners, you could have done it. The only reason you didn't is because you didn't put any effort in. Part of me agreed with him. I was so preoccupied with magic and swordplay that I hadn't tried learning anything else. Perhaps I had been too narrow-minded. The best response was to concede my mistake. You're right. It's my own failing that I lack the proper manners. I apologize for that. As I lowered my head, he stomped his foot so hard the floor creaked. However, I will acknowledge that you made a valiant effort instead of being defensive about your lack of education on etiquette. I will permit you to stay here. I wasn't sure what was going on, but at least he said I could stay. With that, the master of the house turned and strode out of the room, his shoulders stiff and firm. He is the liege lord of the Fitoa region, Soros Boreas Greyrat. He is also Master Paul's uncle, said the butler. So he was the liege lord. His intensity made me worry about how good he was at governing. Then again, there were many adventurers around these parts, so maybe you needed a forceful personality to be a proper liege lord. Wait, did the butler say Greyrat and uncle? In other words, that meant, he's my great-uncle then? Yes. I knew it. So, Paul had used his connection to a family member, albeit one he was estranged from. I never dreamed he came from such a noble family. He had quite the privileged upbringing. What's going on, Thomas? You left the door wide open. Someone appeared in the doorway. A thin, lightweight man with sleek brown hair. It seems like father is in a cheery mood. Did something happen? Because he called the liege lord father, I guessed he was Paul's cousin. The butler said, "This is the young master." Pardon me. Just a moment ago, the master met with Lord Rudeus. It seems he was pleased by him. If he's the kind of person my father likes, perhaps I've chosen incorrectly? He took a seat on the sofa across from me. Oh, right. I should introduce myself. I remembered. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. My name is Rudeus Greyrat. Just as I did a moment ago, I bowed deep and lowered my head. Ah yes, and I am Philip Boreas Greyrat. Nobles greet each other by putting their right hand on their chest and bowing the head slightly. You must have angered my father with your incorrect approach, yes? Like this. I followed his example and bowed my head slightly. Yes, that's right. Although your attempt a moment ago wasn't bad, it was still polite. I'm sure if a worker greeted my father like that, he would be pleased. Now please sit. He flounced back upon on the sofa with a loud thud. I followed his example and took my seat. And now the interview begins. How much have you heard? I was told that if I spent 5 years here teaching the young mistress, I would be given enough money to cover the tuition costs for attending the University of Magic. Is that all? Yes. I see. He put his hand on his chin and gazed at the table as if lost in thought. Do you like girls? Not as much as my father. Oh really? Then you pass. Wait, what? Wasn't that a bit fast? Right now, the only people that girl likes is Edna, her etiquette tutor, and Ghislaine, her sword trainer. I have already dismissed more than 5 people. Among those was a man who taught in the Imperial City. I understood he was implying that just because someone taught in the Imperial City didn't mean they were any good at it. And how is that relevant to whether I like girls or not? It's not. It's just that Paul was the type of man who would work as hard as he could if it was for a cute girl. So I figured you were probably the same. He shrugged. I should have been the one shrugging. Please don't lump us in the same category. I'll be honest, I don't expect much from you. I just figured that since you're Paul's son, I may as well give you a try. You're right. That was very honest, I said. What? You mean you're confident you can do it? No, not at all. Though that wasn't something I could say in this situation. I won't know until I actually meet her. Besides, I could just imagine Paul's mocking laughter if I failed at this job and had to find another. I knew it. You're still just a kid, he would say. This was no joke. I wouldn't tolerate being looked down upon by someone who was technically younger than me. Look, I'll go meet her, and if it looks like she's going to give me trouble, I can try using one of my tricks. This was an opportunity to use some knowledge from my previous life. The perfect way to make a spoiled, bratty girl listen to me. A trick? What do you mean? I gave him a simple explanation. We'll have someone associated with your house kidnap us while I'm with the young mistress. Then I'll use my reading, writing, and arithmetic skills, as well as my magic, so the 2 of us can escape and return safely back here. That's the gist of it. Philip stared blankly for a moment, but realization dawned, and he nodded. In other words, you're trying to get her to study of her own free will. Interesting. But are you sure this will work? I think it has a better chance of working than adults forcing her into it. This was a frequent plot device in anime and manga. A child that hated studying, who learned the importance of education after being caught up in something they needed their wits to escape. It didn't really matter if the ones orchestrating it were her family, right? Is this something Paul taught you? As one of the ways to get a girl to fall for you? No. My father doesn't have to go that far to be popular with women. Popular, huh? Philip burst into laughter. That's right. He's always been popular. He doesn't have to do anything, and the girls come right to him anyway. Every person he's introduced me to has been one of his mistresses. Even Ghislaine. Yes, I'm incredibly envious of him. I'm worried he might even lay his hands on the childhood friend I left behind in Buena Village. Anxiety hit me the moment those words left my lips. 5 years from now, Sylphie would have grown a lot in that time. I would hate to return home to find that she had become part of my father's harem. Don't worry. Paul is only interested in adult women. As Philip said that, he gazed at Ghislaine in the corner of the room. Oh, I realized what he meant. Ghislaine definitely had a very developed figure. Come to think of it, so did Zenith and Lilia. What was so developed, you ask? Their breasts, of course. You should be fine. It's only 5 years. She may mature some, but I doubt she will get that big, since she has elf blood in her veins. Even Paul isn't that much of a fiend. Could I trust that? Besides which, how did he know that Sylphie was part elf? Maybe I was better off assuming there were no secrets about the time I spent in Buena Village. I'm more worried about whether you'll seduce my daughter. Why are you worried about that when I'm only 7? Geez, what a rude thing to say. I wasn't going to do anything. And if she went and fell for me of her own accord, well, it wouldn't be my fault. In Paul's letter about you, he said he was sending you away because you spent too much time playing with women. I thought it was just a joke, but after hearing your plan, I'm starting to doubt that. That's only because I had no friends besides Sylphie, whom I was trying to raise into my perfect, obedient woman. Also, it was none of his business. Well, we won't make any progress by talking. You need to meet my daughter. Thomas, bring him to her. Philip stood. And so, I finally met her. Arrogant. That was my first thought when I saw her. She was 2 years older than me, her eyes sharp and narrow, and her hair wavy. It was also such a pure shade of crimson, it looked like someone threw a bucket of paint on her. My first impression of her was that she was fierce. I had no doubt she would be a beauty one day, but I predicted that most men would find her too much to handle. Maybe if you were a serious masochist. Well, okay, perhaps not quite that bad. Either way, she was a dangerous one. My instincts screamed warnings as I got close to her, but it wasn't like I could just run away. So instead I greeted her just as Philip had instructed me. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Rudeus Greyrat. Humph. She took one look at me and her nostrils flared, just like her grandfather's. She had her arms crossed firmly over her chest as she glared down at me, both figuratively and literally, since she was taller than I was. Her expression turned sour as she said, "What's this? He's younger than I am. And yet he's supposed to teach me? Stop joking around." I knew it. She had a lot of pride. But I couldn't just back down. "I don't think age has anything to do with it," I said. "Oh yeah. Do you have some sort of problem with me?" Her voice was so loud my ears rang. "What I'm saying, miss, is that there are things I can do that you can't." The moment I said that, her hair appeared to stand straight up, like a physical manifestation of her anger. It was terrifying. Ah, crap. Why do I have to be afraid of a girl that's not even 10 yet? Certainly full of yourself, aren't you? Just who do you think I am? I tamped my fear down and answered. You're my second cousin, right? Second? What the heck is that? It means my father is the cousin of your father. In other words, you're the granddaughter of my great uncle. What are you on about? I don't understand. Maybe that wasn't the best way to word it. Perhaps I should just tell her that we were related. You have heard of Paul, right? Of course not. Oh, all right. That was unexpected. Apparently, she didn't know who he was. Not that it really mattered how we were related. It was more important to get her talking. After all, when you first start a video game, the best way to build up a relationship with an NPC is to talk to them repeatedly. Just as I thought that, she lifted her hand and slapped me. Huh, it was so abrupt. She just struck me across the face. Slightly confused, I asked her, why did you hit me? Because you're acting so full of yourself even though you're younger than me. So that's it. My cheek was still hot where she slapped me. It stung. That hurt, I thought. My second impression of her was that she was violent. I guess it looked like I had no other option. All right, then I'll return the gesture. What? I didn't wait for her response. I just slapped her. Smack. It wasn't a very pleasant sound. Oh well, it was probably weak because I'm not used to slapping people. That's fine. At least she felt the pain, I reassured myself. Now do you understand how it feels to be slapped? Was what I was trying to say, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw her hair stand up as she drew back her fist. It was the exact same pose as a Neo statue, one of Buddha's divine and wrathful guardians. Just as I thought that, her fist made contact. Her leg caught mine the moment I began to stumble. Then her hand slammed against my chest, forcing me to the ground. Seconds later, she was perched on top of me. By the time I realized what was going on, she had my arms pinned under her knees. Huh? I can't move? I panicked. Hey, wait. The sound of my dismay was drowned out by her howling. Who do you think you just raised a hand against? I'll make you regret that. Her fist came down on me like a hammer. Ouch, ow, that hurts. Wait, what? No, stop. I took 5 punches before I managed to use my magic to get away. Though my legs threatened to buckle under me, I forced myself upright and rounded on her for a counterattack. I smacked her in the face with a wave of wind magic. You're not going to get away with that. My attack had thrown her, but it didn't stop her for even a moment. She came flying at me with the look of the devil on her face. I realized my mistake the moment I saw her expression. Stumbling, I ran for it. She wasn't the kind of young mistress I was used to. She wasn't the whimsical, selfish type that made decisions based on their feelings in the moment. She was more like the delinquent protagonist of a manga. Maybe I could have beaten her up with my magic, but I doubted it would make her listen to me. She would bide her time to recover, then come back for revenge. I could hit her with magic each time, but her resolve would never waver. Unlike a manga protagonist, she seemed the type to fight dirty too. She might throw a vase at me from the top of the stairs or come at me from the shadows with a wooden sword. She would do anything to make sure she returned the damage she received tenfold. If the opportunity came, she would hold nothing back. This was no joke. I couldn't use healing magic because I couldn't stop to chant the spell. But so long as we kept this up, there was no way she would listen to what I had to say. I was going to have to use brute force to make her listen to me. That, however, was the one decision I couldn't make right now. There, now we're all caught up. Exhausted from her pursuit, the young mistress eventually gave up and returned to her room. She didn't manage to find me, but it was close. I felt numb as that red-haired demon went by me. I'd never imagined I would experience being the protagonist of a horror movie in this way. Utterly exhausted, I returned to Philip, who was waiting for me with a bitter smile on his face. So how did it go? It didn't go at all, I answered, on the verge of tears. When she was punching me, I thought she might actually kill me. When I ran away, I was nearly in tears. It had been so long since I felt like this. Still, I had experienced this before. Not that I was carrying the trauma with me or anything. Well, going to give up then. No, I'm not. How could I? I hadn't accomplished anything. If I backed down now, it meant I got punched for nothing. I want your cooperation to do what we talked about before. I bowed my head to him, sharp and low. I was going to teach that beast what true fear really was. All right, Thomas, make the preparations. Right on cue, the butler took his leave. Philip said, you really do have some interesting ideas. You think so? I do. You are the only teacher to have come to me with such an ambitious plan. I think it will be effective though. Still, I was a little nervous. Would my little trick really work on someone with her personality? Philip shrugged and said, depends on how hard you work. Naturally. And so, we began working on our plan. I entered the room they gave me. It was exquisitely furnished. It had a large bed and other heavily decorated furniture, beautiful curtains, and a brand new bookcase. All it needed was an air conditioner and a computer, and it would be a shut-in's paradise. It was a nice room. This had to be a guest room, rather than servants' quarters, given to me because I bore the name Greyrat. For some reason, most of their maids were beast folk. I heard they discriminated against demons in this country, But it seemed the beast folk were a different matter. "Ah, Paul, you bastard. This is one hell of a place you shipped me off to." I sank onto the bed and put my throbbing head in my hands. Probably a lingering effect from the punching. I muttered a chant to heal my wounds. At least it's better than what happened in my previous life. Sure, the part where I got punched and kicked out of the house was the same. But this time things would be different. I wouldn't just be left out in the cold. There was a world of difference between my present and my past. Paul would make sure of that. He had already prepared a job for me, as well as a place to sleep. He even gave me some spending money. That was more than enough. If my old family had done that much for me, maybe I could have turned my life around. If they had found a job for me, a place for me to live, and watched over me to make sure I didn't run away. No, that would have never happened. I was a 34-year-old with no work history. They abandoned me because there was nothing they could do with me. Anyway, I doubted I would have changed even if they did that for me. I probably wouldn't have even tried to get work at all. If they took my computer, my only love, away from me, I would have probably contemplated suicide. Things were different now because I was different. Because I decided I would work and earn money this time. I may have been forced into this situation, but the timing was perfect. Perhaps I had misunderstood Paul, but he didn't have to send me here to deal with that. What the hell was that rage-filled creature anyways? In all my 40 years of life, I had never seen something like that before. Terrifying wasn't the word for it. It was violent. Like a pressure cooker exploding. Bad enough to give you PTSD. I may have wet my pants a little. Whereas most Japanese blades had a blunt side, she was like a double-edged sword. Like a bottle of poison that had been spilled all over the place. Now I understand why she was kicked out of school. There had been experience in the way she swung her fists at me. Those were fists that were used to punching people. Fists that had pummeled people regardless of whether they resisted or not. She was only 9 and yet so skilled at rendering her opponents powerless. Could I really teach someone like that? I talked to Philip about our plan. First, we would kidnap her and give her a taste of what it felt like to be powerless. That was when I would come in to help her. This way, she would learn to respect me and attend my lessons obediently. A simple plan, but I knew how it should go. So long as I got the right reaction from her, everything would go smoothly. But would it really? She was way more violent than I could have ever imagined. She would bellow and scream until her opponent took the bait, then beat them to a bloody pulp. Her belligerence made it clear just how strong her desire to win was. Was it possible that, even after being abducted, she would be completely unaffected? And that when I went to help her, she would be completely unsurprised and say, "It took you long enough, dirtbag." It was possible. With her, it was definitely possible. It was likely she would react in a way I couldn't predict. So I needed to mentally prepare for that. Failure wasn't an option. I thought about it. I tried coming up with a plan that would definitely allow me to succeed. Yet the more I thought about it, the more muddied my thoughts became. Please, God, let this plan work. In the end, I prayed. I didn't believe in God. And yet, like any other Japanese person, I turned to prayer when I was in trouble. Please, somehow, some way, make this work, I prayed. That was when I realized I had left my treasured panties behind in Buena Village, and I cried. There was no God, aka Roxy, here. Name, young mistress, occupation, granddaughter of Fatoa's liege lord personality. Fierce doesn't listen to what people say reading/writing. Can write her own name arithmetic. Can add single-digit numbers magic. No clue fencing. Sword god style. Beginner tier etiquette. Can do the Boreas style greeting people she likes. Grandfather, Ghislaine. Chapter 2. All according to plan? When I opened my eyes, I found myself in the middle of a dingy storehouse. Sunlight filtered in through an iron-barred window. I was in pain, but as far as I could tell no bones were broken, so I muttered a healing spell to recover. There we go. I had fully recovered. My clothes weren't even torn. This was going exactly as I had planned. My plan to ensnare the young mistress was exactly as follows. Right now, my plan had reached step 7 smoothly. All that remained was for me to use my magic, knowledge, wisdom, and courage to make a magnificent escape. To make things more realistic, I would be improvising a little from here. I was a little nervous about how well that would go. However, things were a bit different from what I'd planned. This storehouse was covered in dust, and in one corner was a broken chair and a discarded suit of armor with a hole in it. My plan was to be somewhere a bit cleaner than this. Then again, we did say we'd make this as believable as possible, so I guess this was the result. Emma, the young mistress woke a few moments later. She opened her eyes, didn't recognize her surroundings, and tried jumping to her feet. But since her hands were tied behind her back, she fell over and squirmed like a caterpillar instead. She lost her cool the moment she realized she couldn't move. What the hell is this? Stop messing around. Who the hell do you think I am? Untie me immediately. Her voice was unbearably loud. I noted this back at the manor too. She really didn't dial down her volume in this small space at all. I thought maybe she raised her voice because the manor was so huge and she wanted people to hear her in every corner of the complex when she spoke. But no, she was her grandfather's granddaughter. Soros was also the type to shout down his opponent, even if he doted on his granddaughter, and she must have seen how her grandfather intimidated the servants and Philip. Children loved to imitate what they saw, especially if it was something bad. "Shut up already, you damn brat." The door banged open and in came a man, probably because of her screaming. His clothes were all ragged, and a foul stench clung to him. He was bald and his face unshaven. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd pulled out a business card that said, "Hi, I'm a bandit." Nice choice, I thought. Now she would never figure out that we staged everything. You stink. Don't you dare come close to me. You smell awful. Who the hell do you think I am? Any minute now, Ghislaine is going to come in here and split you in two. Gah! Whack! She was sent flying with an audible whoosh. A loud cry left her mouth as she smacked into the wall. Damn brat. Think you can mouth off to me, huh? We already know you're the liege lord's grandchildren. The man didn't hold anything back as he began stomping on the young mistress, whose hands were still tied behind her back. That's going a little far, isn't it? That hurts. Stop, GH. Stop, Ak. Stop it, poo. He continued kicking her for a while. When he finished, he spat on her face and glared at me. I turned my head to avoid his gaze, and a kick came flying at my face. Arg, that hurt. We were supposed to be putting on an act, but he could have showed a little restraint. I did tell them that I could use healing magic, but that's for looking so damn happy. He exited the storehouse. I could hear voices beyond the door. Did they shut up? Yeah. You didn't kill him, did you? Bang up the merch too bad, and it'll lose its value. There was something strange about the conversation. It was too realistic, which would have been fine if it were just an act. The problem was that it didn't seem like one. Maybe, just maybe, this was the real deal. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. At the very least, we should be fine as long as we still have the boy. Not good. After the voices went away, I counted to 300 before I burned. Through the ropes tying my hands, I went over to where the young mistress was lying. Blood was pouring out of her nose. She stared blankly as she mumbled something to herself. I realized she was muttering, "You won't get away with this," and "I'm going to tell my grandpa," among other more dangerous utterances that I couldn't bear to listen to. For now, I needed to assess her injuries. Eek! It must have hurt, because her head snapped up as she looked at me, fear in her eyes. I put a finger to my lips and monitored her reaction as I looked her over. She had 2 broken bones. Oh, goddess of motherly affection, close up this one's wounds and restore the vigor to their body. Healing. I chanted a mid-level healing spell in a low voice, restoring the young mistress's body to health. Unfortunately, just putting in more magical energy wouldn't make healing spells more effective. Hopefully what I did was enough to heal her wounds properly. She would be fine so long as her bones knitted back together the right way. The pain is... She looked down at her body, puzzled. I whispered in her ear, "Shoo, be quiet. Your bones were broken, so I used healing magic. Young mistress, it appears we have been abducted by people that bear a grudge against the liege lord." Therefore, she wasn't listening. Ghislaine, help. They're going to kill me. Save me, hurry. Her bellowing voice echoed through the room. I immediately hid the rope that had bound my hands beneath my clothes, scurried to the corner of the room, and hid my hands between my back and the wall, pretending I was still restrained. The power of the young mistress's voice was enough to draw the man back, and the door banged open viciously. Shut the hell up. This time he kicked her even harder than before. She really doesn't learn, I thought. Little shit. Next time you fuss, I'll kill you. And of course, I got kicked a second time too. I didn't do anything. Why did you have to kick me? Now I feel like crying, I thought as I returned to the young mistress's side. Go. It was bad. I wasn't sure if it was a broken rib, but she was vomiting blood. One of her internal organs had probably ruptured. Her arms and legs were broken too. I didn't know much about medical treatment, but these wounds looked serious enough that she might die if I just left her like this. Let this divine power be as satisfying nourishment, giving one who has lost their strength the strength to rise again. Healing. For now, I decided to use a basic healing spell for a slight recovery. The blood coming from her mouth stopped. At least now she wouldn't die, probably. Go. It still hurts. Heal all of it. No. If I heal you, you'll just get yourself kicked again, right? Use your own magic. I can't do that. You could if you learned how. With that, I went to the storehouse entrance and pressed my ear to the door. I wanted to hear more of our captor's conversation. This was completely different from my plan. No matter the reason, they had gone too far. So, we gonna sell to that one guy? No, let's use M for ransom. Won't they hunt us down? I don't care. If that happens, we'll just go to a neighboring country. So, they really did intend to sell us off. It seemed like we had entrusted the kidnapping scheme to someone close to the family, but had instead gotten mixed up with real kidnappers. I wondered where the plan went wrong. Was it the moment we were kidnapped? Or was Philip really trying to sell his daughter? No, the latter was unlikely. Oh well. Either way, my job was still the same. This just meant we had no safety net. We'd get more for ransoming him than we would for selling, right? Let's decide by tonight. Yeah, sell or ransom. They seemed to disagree whether they should sell us somewhere or demand ransom from the liege lord. Either way, they would be moving us out of here tonight. We had to get moving while there was still light. All right, what to do? I could smash the door and subdue our kidnappers with magic. Maybe if she saw me defeat the people who had beat her senseless, the young mistress would learn to respect. No, that was unlikely. She was the type to think she could have done the same if they hadn't beat her up. Plus, that would just show her that violence brings results. I needed to teach her that violence earned you nothing, otherwise she would just keep punching me. I didn't want her to feel like she had that power. There's also no guarantee you'd be able to beat those kidnappers, I realized. If they were as strong as Paul or Ghislaine, I was positive I would lose. And if I lost, they would definitely kill me. All right, then let's get out of here without messing with the kidnappers. I glanced back to check on the young mistress. Yikes. She was glaring at me, eyes full of anger. Let's just get started with the plan. First, I used earth and fire magic to fill the cracks in the door. Then I melted the door knob so the handle couldn't be turned. Now it was just a door that couldn't be opened. Of course, that meant nothing if they smashed through it. Still, it would buy us some time. Next, the window. It was a small hole with metal bars set in it. I considered focusing my fire magic on one spot to burn through the iron, but that would need temperatures too high to be practical. In the end, I used water magic to loosen the bricks framing the iron bars. Once I successfully pried them out, what was left was a hole just large enough for a single child to fit through. Now we had an escape route. Young mistress. It seems the people who kidnapped us have a grudge against the liege lord. Their friends are going to be here tonight. They were just talking about how they're going to beat us to death. That has to be lie, right? Of course it was. But the young mistress's face had turned pale anyway. I don't want to die, so goodbye. I grabbed the ledge of the empty window frame and hoisted myself up. At the same time, a voice came through the door. Hey, this won't open. What the hell is going on? Bang, bang. They pounded on the door. The young mistress eyed me and the door in despair. Don't leave me behind. Help. Oh wow. She caved quicker than I thought. I guess this situation was terrifying even for her. I dropped to the floor, got close to her, and whispered, Can you promise to listen to everything I say until we get back to the house? I'll listen, sure. Can you also promise you won't yell? Ghislaine isn't here, okay? She nodded vigorously. I'll promise. So just hurry up, or they'll come. They'll come. Her demeanor had changed completely from when she punched me. She was filled with fear and unease. Good, now she understood. I tried to sound calm and cool. If you break your promise, I will leave you behind. I reinforced the door with earth magic. Then I used fire to remove her bindings and healing to restore her to full health. Finally, I slipped out the window and pulled the young mistress out with me. Once we escaped the storehouse, we were greeted by an unfamiliar town. There were no castle walls. This wasn't Roa. It wasn't small enough to be a village, but it was a very small town. I had to think fast, or they were going to find us. This is far enough. The young mistress declared loudly. She seemed to think we had already outrun our enemy. You promised you wouldn't shout until we got home. Why do I have to keep any promises to you? She said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. This little brat. Oh really? Then this is where we part. Goodbye. She flared her nostrils and began walking away, but then we heard distant, angry shouts. Those damn brats. Where the hell did they go? They must have busted the door down or seen that the window bars were missing. Either way, they knew we had fled and were looking for us. Eek. The young mistress yelped and scurried back to me. That was a lie a second ago. I won't shout anymore. Now take me home. I'm not your servant, nor am I your slave. It irritated me how she changed her mind so easily. What are you saying? You're my tutor, right? No, I'm not. You said you didn't like me, so I wasn't hired. Well, I'll hire you then, she said reluctantly. I needed a real promise this time. Again with the promises. Once we get back to the manor, you'll just break it just like you did a second ago, right? I said, hoping I sounded unaffected and distant, yet confident that she wouldn't keep her word. I won't break my promise, so I demand. No, I mean help me. You can come with me, as long as you keep your promise not to shout and listen to what I say. She got it. She nodded meekly. Very good, I thought. Now let's move on to the next step. First, I retrieved the 5 large copper coins I'd tucked into my underwear. This was all the money I owned. 10 large copper coins made up 1 silver coin. So this wasn't much money, but it would be enough for our purposes. Now come with me, please. We headed toward the town entrance, away from the distant sound of angry shouting. A sleepy guard stood on duty. I passed him one of my coins. If anyone asks if you've seen us, please tell them that we left the city. What? Children? Okay, I guess. You guys playing hide and seek or something. This is a lot of money. Geez, just what wealthy family are you two from? Please, just tell them what I said. Yeah, I got it. It was a rude reply, but we couldn't afford to linger. Next, I headed to the stagecoach's waiting area. The fare and terms of use were written on the wall, but I had already read that information days ago. Instead, I was looking for the town's location. It looks like we're 2 cities away from Roa, in a town called Whedon, I whispered to the young mistress. Keeping to her promise, she replied in a hushed voice. How can you tell? It's written right there. I can't read it. Here we go, I thought. Being able to read is really beneficial. The way the stagecoach works is also written here. Still, it was amazing that they'd managed to bring us this far in just a day's time. It made me nervous being in a city I didn't know. Almost like I was reliving a previous trauma. No, I thought. This is completely different from that time when I didn't know how to find the location for hello work. As I was lost in thought, the sound of shouting drew close. Shit, where the hell are they hiding? Get out here. Hide. I grabbed the young mistress and ducked into the bathroom, locking the door behind us. Outside came the clamor of heavy footsteps. Where the hell are they? Don't you dare think you got away from us. Whoa, scary. Oh, just knock it off already. Acting all pissed off as you try to hunt us down. You could at least speak in a sweet voice like an owner trying to draw out their cat. Maybe you would have some chance of deceiving us into coming out. It wouldn't work, of course, but at least you'd have a chance. Damn it, they're not here. Before long, their voices grew distant. We had a moment to relax a bit, though it was too soon to let our guard down. After all, when people were in a panic, they tended to circle around and search the same area repeatedly. Hey, are we okay? She held a trembling hand over her mouth. Well, if they find us, let's put up a good fight. All right. Okay, though I doubt we can win. Oh, really? I said it because she looked like she was getting her fighting spirit back. I didn't want to get pummeled by them another time. I was looking at the fare for the stagecoach, and it looks like we'll have to change coaches twice to get back. Change coaches? She seemed confused as to why that mattered. Only. Side story, the aftermath and the BoreasGreeting style. He one pulling the strings behind the kidnapping had been the butler, Thomas. He was the person with connections to a perverted noble that the hoodlums had referred to. The young mistress had apparently caught that noble's eye a while ago, and he wanted to beat her fierce and unyielding spirit out of her. Thomas, seduced by the money, added the 2 men the perverted noble had selected into my plan. Geez, there really were some shameless people out there in the world. If he was going to do that again, I wish he'd talk to me first. He completely miscalculated by not considering 2 things. Firstly, that I possessed enough magical prowess to escape the 2 bandits, and secondly, that those 2 had no loyalty to him whatsoever. As for the perverted noble, he played innocent and escaped punishment. Part of it was because Thomas's testimony was inadequate, and part of it was because the 2 bandits were dead, so we could find no proof of the noble's involvement. There were too many unknown variables. I suspected political machinations were involved. The incident was considered resolved entirely because of Ghislaine's involvement. The Greyrat family could tout the fact that they had the Sword King Ghislaine staying with them, preventing possible future incidents while proclaiming the strength and wealth of their house. I was ordered to give all the credit to Ghislaine, even after I told them what transpired. It seemed they didn't want others in the Greyrat family to know of my existence. Yet more political bargaining, I assumed. The bigger surprise to me was that there were even more Greyrats. And that's how it is. Understood. Yes, understood. Philip explained all of this to me in the reception room. I thought he was just the son of the liege lord, but he was also the town's mayor. I wondered if he was the one who had settled the whole matter. You seem pretty relaxed for someone whose daughter was kidnapped. I am now. I would be panicking if she were still missing, he said. Certainly. Now, about you working as Eris's tutor. As we were about to begin discussing my future, the door flew open with a bang, and in waltzed Eris's incredibly exuberant grandfather. I heard it all, Soros said. He barreled into the reception room and tousled my hair with a firm hand. I heard you saved Eris. WHWH, what are you talking about? Ghislaine is the one who did it. I didn't do anything. His eyes gleamed darkly, like a bird of prey. That's terrifying. You think you can lie to me? And no. But Lord Philip told me to say, Philip. He rounded on his son, and without a moment of hesitation, swung his fist. It landed with a vicious crack. Ugh. The young lord took the blow right to the face and tumbled over the back of the sofa. The liege lord's fist had been so fast. Faster even than Eris, too quick for the eyes to follow. Bastard. This to the boy who saved your daughter. How dare you not offer even a word of gratitude, just so you can partake in your foolish theater between nobles. Philip, still splayed on the floor, responded without moving. Father, Paul may have been disowned by our family, but he is still a Greyrat. That means his son Rudeus, who also carries our blood, is a part of our family as well. So rather than outwardly praise and reward him, I thought the best way to thank him was to treat him with kindness as a part of our family. He spoke very matter-of-factly for someone laid out on the floor. Perhaps he was used to being punched by Soros. Very well. Then go ahead and keep up that farce with the nobles. The older man plopped himself on the empty sofa. It seemed he wasn't going to apologize for punching Philip. That was just the kind of person he was. Physical punishment was as natural as breathing here. Come to think of it, Eris never apologized to me either. She also never thanked me for saving her. Oh well, it's fine. Rudeus, the liege lord folded his arms, lifted his chin, and glared at me. This seemed familiar. I have a request. Is that really the kind of attitude you should have when asking someone for something? He was just like Eris. No, that was backwards. She was the one imitating him after all. I want you to teach Eris magic. Why, might I ask? She came to me to request it. She said your magic was so seared into her mind, she couldn't get it out of her head. It certainly was magic that seared the eyes anyway. Of course. I bit my tongue as I began to respond on instinct. The most likely reason for her horrible personality was Sorrow's always spoiling her like this. Maybe not the only reason, but she had certainly been influenced by him, based on how much of his personality she imitated. If she was going to grow at all as a person, I had to stop her from being spoiled. It might not be my responsibility to see that she grew up properly, but if things continued like this, it would affect my ability to teach her. It was best to deal with each problem as it appeared. That isn't something for you to ask of me, Lord Soros. Eris should ask me herself. What did you say? Indignant, he raised his fist. I panicked and covered my face with my hands. What was he? Some sort of nuclear bomb waiting to explode. Do you really mean to raise Eris into an adult that can't lower her head to ask for something when she wants it? Oh, you make a fair point. You're right. He slammed his fist on his knee and nodded vigorously. In a great, loud voice he said, Eris, come to the reception room right now. I thought my eardrums were going to burst. What kind of lung capacity did a person need to be able to yell that loud? Eris was the exact same way. Did no one in this manner understand the concept of asking people to deliver messages? These savages, I thought. Philip returned to his seat on the sofa while a butler, a different guy, apparently named Alphonse, closed the door that had been left open. I later learned that, because Soros was like a storm that raged out of rooms just as quickly as he came in, they would wait for a while before closing a door. He was a selfish old man that loved to throw doors open, but was not as fond of shutting them. Okawet, a voice responded from somewhere else in the manor. After a while came the tapping of approaching footsteps. Here I am, just as you asked. She didn't have quite the force of her grandfather, but Eris still energetically threw the doors open and burst inside. Every single action she took was made with her grandfather in mind. Children love to mimic adults after all. If I hadn't gotten punched my first day here, I might have smiled at the resemblance. Instead, I could firmly say that this, too, had to stop. Oh, as soon as she caught sight of me, she lifted her chin and glared. Was this intimidating pose passed down in the Boreas family? Grandfather, did you tell him what we talked about? He stood suddenly and folded his arms, glaring at her. It was the exact same pose. Eris, if you want to ask something of someone, you need to bow your own head and ask. Her lips pushed out in a pout. But you said you would ask him for me, enough? If you won't ask him yourself, then we won't hire him. Huh. What did he just say? No. Wait, I guess that was right. That would be a bit problematic for me. But I guess this was what you'd call reaping what you sow. Grr. Eris glared at me, her cheeks flushed red. It wasn't a blush of embarrassment. She was pissed off and humiliated. Her face said that if her grandfather wasn't there, she'd chase me all the way to the bowels of hell and turn me into minced meat. Scary. Please. Is that the kind of attitude to take when you're asking someone for something? Soros bellowed. Like you have any room to talk, I thought. Grr. Eris took a fistful of her long, red hair into each hand. She made a tail on either side of her temples, instant twin tails. Then, just like that, she winked at me. Please teach me magic, Mew. Wait. Was I dreaming? I blacked out for a minute there. It felt like I'd just had a really awful dream. Don't worry about teaching me reading or writing, Mew. Well crap, it wasn't a dream. Chapter 3, Her Ferocity, Unabated. It had been a month since I became Eris's tutor. From the moment I began giving her lessons, she wouldn't listen to me. As soon as it was time for reading, writing, and arithmetic, she would vanish. She wouldn't show her face again until it was time for sword practice. There were exceptions, of course. Magic class was the only one she faithfully paid attention in. The first time she produced a fireball, she was happy and enthusiastic. She watched as her fire roared, engulfing the curtain, and said, "Someday, I'm going to make fireworks in the sky, just like you did." Of course, I immediately put the flames out and warned her not to use fire magic when I wasn't around. Eris beamed at the half-burned curtain, satisfied with herself. She looked like a pyromaniac, but at least she was motivated. I felt assured that she could get through the rest of her curriculum. Or so I thought. I later realized my prediction was way off base. Eris refused to listen during reading, writing, and arithmetic lessons. If I tried to admonish her, she would just run away. When I tried to catch her, she would punch me and run off. If I caught up to her, she would come back only to punch me once more then run off again. I thought she would understand the importance of arithmetic and literacy after we were kidnapped. She must have really hated those subjects. When I went to Philip with my problem, He simply told me, making your student attend your lessons is also part of your job as a home tutor. I didn't disagree. Ghislaine attended my lessons and took them seriously, but she was just an extra. I couldn't teach her alone, so I had to search for Eris. Eris wasn't so easy to find. She had lived here her entire life, while I had only been here a month. There was a huge difference in our familiarity with the terrain, and that went for this hide-and-seek problem as well. Apparently, other home tutors had struggled with the same issue. Sometimes they would eventually find her, since she might have a wide area to hide in, but it was still limited to the manor. Those that did find her, however, were beaten to a pulp. That was why her first tutor resigned. One tutor tried to beat her up instead, fighting violence with violence. Eris stole into their room in the dead of night and attacked them with a wooden sword as they slept. Needless to say, they resigned after sustaining injuries that took months to fully recover from. Ghislaine was the only one who had managed to beat Eris at her own game. I wasn't confident I could do the same. If finding her meant I was going to be sent to the hospital, I didn't want to. I wasn't keen on the idea of discovering her only to be left battered and bruised afterward. If magic were the only thing she was interested in, why not give up on the other lessons and just focus on that? But Philip insisted that I teach her reading, writing, and arithmetic as well. Teach her as much of those as you teach her magic, he'd said. Actually, those are more important than magic, he told me. I agreed. Maybe I needed to have her kidnapped one more time. Children that didn't learn needed to be punished. Just as I thought that, I finally found her. She was in the stables, hidden in a bundle of straw with her belly exposed, resting peacefully. Zizzy. She was sound asleep. Her unconscious face was almost like that of an angel. No, I couldn't be deceived by appearances. She was the devil incarnate. And of course by devil incarnate, I meant the kind that would punch you until you vomited blood. Even so, I needed to wake her up. For the moment, I decided to pull down her shirt to cover her stomach, so she wouldn't catch a cold. Then I started fondling her chest while my inner wise old sage evaluated them. Still an AA cup, but I sense great potential for growth. As you age, you may yet achieve E cup, or even larger. I shall massage you daily to check your progress. This is also part of your training. Ho ho ho. Thank you, wise old sage. After I had my fill, I called out to her in a quiet voice. Young miss, wake up please. Miss Eris, it's arithmetic fun time. She wasn't waking up. I had no other choice. Don't blame me if your panties get taken. It's your fault for being a bad girl, I thought. But just as I tried to quietly slip my hands inside her long, loose skirt, Eris's eyes snapped open. Her gaze moved from her legs, where my hands were, gradually up to my face. Grr. She no longer looked half asleep. Instead, her teeth were grinding together and her face darkened with anger. Here it comes, I realized a moment too late. Her clenched fist came flying at me. My face. I hurriedly crossed my arms in front of me for protection. The impact hit my stomach instead. Her fist struck deep. I swooned in agony, my knees buckling beneath me. Well, I didn't vomit blood, but I did get punched. Humph. She sniffed once at me, then kicked me. Once she was done, she stepped over my collapsed form and walked right out of the stable. There was nothing I could do. I finally went to Ghislaine for help. The woman who, according to Paul, had muscles for brains. If she talked about why she wanted to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, surely it would resonate with Eris. The girl was sure to listen to whatever Ghislaine had to say, or so I naively thought. At first, Ghislaine told me to figure it out on my own, but when I used water magic to fake tears, she reluctantly agreed. Too easy. Okay, now show me what you've got, I thought. Ghislaine and I didn't work on a plan. I just left it up to her. She chose to start during the break period of our magic lesson. A long time ago, I thought I was fine as long as I had a sword. Unbidden, she began telling Eris about her past. About how her master accepted her even though she was a bad kid. About her first friends when she became an adventurer. The lengthy preamble turned out to be a simple story about her and her own personal struggles. When I was an adventurer, the others did everything for me. The buying and selling of arms and armor, food, supplies, and daily necessities, as well as reading contracts, maps, and signs. After we parted, I learned the importance of many things. The weight of a filled canteen, the necessity of getting coals to build a fire, and the inconvenience of being unable to use your left hand when you're carrying a torch. Her party had disbanded 7 years ago. They were forced to do so after Paul and Zenith got married and isolated themselves by moving out to the countryside. I had guessed as much. It seemed Paul and Ghislaine really had been in a party together. Those of us who remained talked about staying together, but Paul, our hit-and-run attacker, and Zenith, our group's only healer, had left. Even if we didn't disband then, we would have eventually. It was obvious. A 6-person party. A warrior, a swordsman, a swordswoman, a magician, a priest, and a thief. That was probably the makeup of their group if I broke it down by occupation. Even though Ghislaine was only a holy tier swordswoman at the time, her attack strength would have been pretty high. Warrior, unknown person tank swordsman. Paul secondary tank and DPS swordswoman, Ghislaine DPS magician, unknown person DPS priest, zenith healer. They sounded like a balanced group. It seemed like thief was a general term for someone who did odd jobs, from picking locks, spotting traps, and constructing a tent, to making deals with merchants. It was a position reserved for someone who could read well, had a sharp mind, and was agile. Most came from merchant families. You could at least call them treasure hunters or something, I said without thinking. Ghislaine's nostrils flared. Thief is fitting for someone who always swiped our money and gambled it away. Didn't you guys gang up on them when you found out? Nope. They were skilled at gambling, so most of the time they came back with more than they took. They rarely came back with less than half. And they restrained themselves when we didn't have much coin. Or so she said. Still, no matter how much profit they managed to make from their gambling, why did everyone let them get away with it? I struggled to comprehend. Not to brag, but gambling was at least one thing I never touched. Although I did spend over 100,000 yen on online games. Then again, they had a womanizer like Paul in their party, so they probably weren't that concerned about the morality of their members. Everyone drew the line somewhere. There were as many rules as there were people. What exactly is the difference between a warrior and a swordsman? I asked curiously. If both professions were part of the vanguard, there didn't seem to be a reason to distinguish between them. If you use a sword in one of the three primary styles, then you are a swordsman. If you use a different style but still use a sword, you are a warrior. If you use one of the styles but don't use a sword, then you're also a warrior. Ooh, so that means swordsman is a special title. More accurately, it was the three primary sword styles that made their skill special. The technique Ghislaine used when she defeated our kidnappers was quite amazing. I didn't even catch her unsheathing her sword. She barely moved, and their heads just fell off. I found out afterward that the technique was called Sword of Light, a secret technique of the sword god style. So what about a knight? A knight is a knight. Knights are appointed by the king or liege lords. They are educated in reading and arithmetic. Some among them can even use simple magic. Since many of them are nobles, they're also full of pride. They were probably so educated because they attended school. Back then, my father wasn't a knight yet, was he? I'm not entirely sure, but he called himself a swordsman at the time. How about magic knights or magic warriors? I heard those exist too. There are some people who use offensive magic who call themselves that. You are free to call yourself what you want, no matter your profession. Eris's eyes lit up as she listened to the conversation. I hoped she wasn't about to decide to drag either Ghislaine or me out to the closest labyrinth. It made me anxious. That wasn't the kind of adventure I wanted. Spending each day surrounded by beautiful women? Now that was more like it. Ah, crap. I was supposed to have Ghislaine talk about the importance of learning to read and write. Not this, I lamented internally. I screwed up. There was one small mercy. The following day Eris attended all her lessons. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. It was all thanks to Ghislaine. After that, anytime something happened, Ghislaine would begin recounting her struggles as an adventurer. I got a stomachache each time it happened, but thanks to that, Eris finally understood the importance of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Or maybe her main reason for attending was because she found Ghislaine's stories so interesting. Either way, a good result for me. Part of me wished I had thought of doing this at the beginning. But of course, if we hadn't been kidnapped, she probably would have never listened to me in the first place. Back then, she'd looked at me like I was a worm. So my plan wasn't pointless. In any case, things had turned out well. Our first lessons involved teaching Eris the 4 basic arithmetic operations. Since she had attended school and previously been instructed by tutors, she already knew how to do simple addition. Rudeus, my pupil energetically thrust her hand into the air. Yes, Eris. Why is division necessary? She didn't understand the importance of multiplication and division. On top of that, she was terrible at subtraction. If anything went above single digits, she'd give up. Rather than worry about the necessity, just think of it as doing the opposite of multiplication, I explained. I'm asking when I am ever going to use this. Okay, so for example, say you have 100 silver coins, and you have to split them evenly across 5 people. My last tutor said the same thing. She slammed her fist against the table. So why do I have to split it evenly? She was quibbling like a defiant child. To be honest, there was no necessity for it. Who knows? That's something you would have to ask those 5 people. It's just that if you want to split it evenly, it's more convenient if you know how to use division. More convenient? So that means I don't really need to use it, right? If you don't want to use it, then no, you don't have to. Although there is a big difference between not using something and being unable to use something. Ugh, asking whether they could do something or not was a good way of shutting up someone with as much pride as Eris, though it did little to solve the root of the problem. She was trying to argue that she didn't need to learn arithmetic. In times like these, it was best to look for Ghislaine for help. Ghislaine, have you ever had any problems that related to dividing things evenly? Yes. I once lost my food supplies in a labyrinth, so I tried to retrace my way back. But I messed up when I tried to ration my food to last me until I made it out. I went 3 days without eating or drinking. I thought I was going to die. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I ate some demon feces that I found on the ground, but it tore up my insides. I managed to make it through the stomach pain, nausea, and diarrhea, but then I noticed a cluster of. The story went on for almost 5 minutes, making me sick to my stomach. I listened with a sickly tinge to my face. But to Eris, it was a heroic tale. Her eyes were lit up the whole time. And that's why I want to learn division. Continue the lesson. As soon as Ghislaine said that, Eris ceased her quibbling. The whole Greyrat family seemed to have an affinity for beast people, although maybe not as much as Soros. Eris was clearly attached to Ghislaine. She would always listen quietly when Ghislaine began one of her tales. It was like a little brother clinging to his older sister, eager to imitate her. Okay then, let's do some more boring practice reps today. Bring me these problems once you have them all solved. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me. With that, things gradually progressed. Ghislaine made for an excellent teacher. She pointed out each of my faults in explicit detail and gave me advice. Paul would tell you which parts you had messed up on, but he wouldn't tell you how to improve. Today she gave both Eris and I a sword and made us practice fighting while giving us guidance. Remember your attack stance. Watch your opponent closely. Eris repelled my wooden sword with a dull thunk. If you can move faster than your opponent, then read their movements and aim your sword. If you're slower than they are, then shift your body to avoid the trajectory of their blade. Unable to do either, I took a hard smack from Eris's sword. The impact was strong enough I felt it through the cotton padding of my tanned leather protector. Watch the tips of your opponent's toes and predict their movement. I took another blow. Rudeus, stop using your head. Just focus on moving in before your opponent and swinging your sword. But focusing requires using my head. So which is it? Eris, don't stop your attacks. Your opponent hasn't surrendered yet. Yes. The difference between us was obvious. Eris had the freedom to respond to Ghislaine, where I didn't. That freedom also allowed her to keep smacking me until Ghislaine finally told her to stop. She held nothing back, as though she were releasing all the pent-up anger she felt during our arithmetic lessons. Damn it. Within a month, however, I saw a dramatic improvement. I was glad to have a partner like Eris, who had similar abilities as me. Just like in any other field, being around someone of equal skill spurred your own growth. Though Eris was really a little better than me. But it was nothing like the gap between me and Paul or Ghislaine. At least she was still at a level where I knew what she was doing. If I could understand it, I could learn from it. Like if she beat me using a certain technique, I would become more cautious so it wouldn't happen again. That sort of thinking was possible when you were on even footing with your opponent. Paul, on the other hand, was so skilled that it was impossible to counter him. If you couldn't understand what your opponent was doing, then they would beat you before you had a clue what was happening. Even receiving guidance from someone more skilled could be difficult because of the fundamental difference in their abilities versus yours. It would just make you doubt what you were doing. Ghislaine was good at teaching, so she was a different story. However, she would also teach you how to respond to attacks and counter them at the same time. So when you found yourself on the receiving end of one, you would end up hesitating because you were anticipating how to counter. With Eris as an opponent, however, small tricks or the slightest change in movement brought about an entirely different result. Sometimes something that worked the day before wouldn't work the following day, or Eris would do something completely different. Sometimes the things I couldn't do yesterday I could do today, and the same went for my opponent. Because there was almost no gap in our abilities, it worked out. It was those little changes and discoveries that accumulated and fostered growth. It was good having a rival. Sometimes she got ahead of me, and sometimes I surpassed her. Even if our progress came little by little, we took turns getting ahead of one another, and by the end there were huge improvements. Before we knew it, that progress built up, and we became much stronger. Still, Eris learned quicker than I did. Even if a lion and a deer trained the same way, it was obvious the lion would become stronger. That was a bitter pill to swallow since I had been training with Paul since I was little. Rudeus has a long way to go, huh? Eris crossed her arms and looked down at me, collapsed on the ground. Ghislaine scolded her. Don't get ahead of yourself, Eris. You have been holding a sword for longer than he has, and you're older. Ghislaine only dropped the miss when we were practicing the sword. She said it was necessary. I know that. Besides, he has magic. That's right. My magic abilities were the only thing she gave me credit for. Though it is strange that he only slows down when he's being attacked, Ghislaine noted. That's because it's scary facing an opponent who's attacking you for real. As soon as I said that, Eris bonked me on the head. What the heck was that? How pathetic. That's why people look down on you. No, he's simply a magician. And that's fine. As soon as Ghislaine said that, Eris nodded arrogantly. Oh really? Then I guess I can't blame him. So why did I get punched again? Sorry, but I don't know how to fix your cowering. You'll have to do it yourself, Ghislaine said. Okay. Right now, it didn't matter who my opponent was. I just froze up. I had a long road ahead still. but I do at least feel like I have gotten a lot stronger since you started teaching me. That's because Paul is the instinctive type. Doesn't make for a good teacher. The instinctive type. Ah, I guess there were those types in this world too. What's that instinctive type? Eris asked. The type of person who can just do things without being able to explain how they learned to do it. She pouted when I explained, probably because she was the same type of person. Is there something wrong with that? Eris asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. Since we were in the middle of a lesson, I decided to let Ghislaine pick up the slack. I directed my gaze at her. There isn't. But it doesn't matter how much talent you have. You won't get stronger if you don't use your head, and you won't be able to teach people well either. Why won't you be able to teach people well? Because you don't even understand what you're doing. Besides, if you can't understand the entirety of it, then you won't be able to improve. It seemed, to a sword king like Ghislaine, that the key to reaching an advanced skill level was being able to apply the basics in practice. If you mastered the essentials, you would be able to use them in any given situation. Only then would you be considered a holy tier swordsman. But more important were diligent work and talent. Of course, in the end, it all comes down to talent, I thought. I used to be the instinctive type as well, but once I started using my head and thinking logically, I became king tier, Ghislaine said. That's amazing. I was honestly impressed. She changed her ways so she could succeed. That was incredible. You're a saint tier water magician yourself, Rudeus. I'm the instinctive type as well. But magic is different from swordplay. You can do anything as long as you have enough magical power, I said. If you say so. But either way, the basics are important, you understand. Ghislaine pressed on. I understand. In this case, however, it was because my teacher was so good at what she did that I achieved saint tier. But now that we were talking about the importance of the basics, I had focused purely on performing magic without chanting spells. What did it mean to lack in the basics of magic? Roxy's lessons had focused less on mastering the basics than on progression. Maybe she, being a prodigy herself, didn't worry as much about the foundations. Well, I'm not worried about becoming that strong, so it has nothing to do with me. Eris proudly declared as I was lost in thought. I smiled wryly at her words. As a junior high student in my previous life, I'd said something similar. It's not like I'm trying to be number one, I would say, excusing my lack of effort. I was about to reprimand her for her attitude, but she continued. But I will do my best to be as good as the two of you. So much for that. She had a goal. She was different from my past self. We had free time after our morning lessons and afternoon sword practice. Today, I was headed toward the library. Ghislaine and Eris both possessed magical textbooks, so I thought there might be a grimoire there. I had a maid with dog ears guide me, since I didn't know the way. We passed by Hilda, Philip's wife. She had the same deep crimson hair as Eris, with an ample bosom. I expected Eris would take after her as she grew older. I had been introduced to her, but the two of us had little contact. Let's see, I think I'm supposed to put one hand on my chest. My lady, it seems today is my lucky. TCH. She clicked her tongue at me and ignored my greeting. I stood there frozen, my hand still pressed to my chest. Lord Rudeus. No, it's fine, I said, raising a hand to cut off the maid's attempt to soothe me. It was a bit of a shock though. Did she hate me? I didn't think I had done anything wrong. Come to think of it, she didn't have any other children besides Eris, did she? No, let's not ask that question. If I did, I felt like someone even worse than Eris would appear and increase my workload 3- or 4-fold. That was a possibility best left unconsidered. When I arrived at the library, Philip was there. Oh, you're interested in the library, are you? Philip had an excited twinkle in his eye. Excited about what? I wondered. Yes, a bit. Then you should take your time looking around. I took him up on that and perused the library. Unfortunately, I didn't find what I was looking for. I was hoping to get a grimoire like Roxy had, but all I found were expensive volumes that couldn't be taken out of the library. It seemed there were only a limited amount of grimoires in the world, and people didn't leave them lying around. Guess I couldn't be so lucky. In the end, I got some books about the history of this world. I could at least study those when I was free. At the end of each day, I spent time in my room preparing for the next day's lessons. Most of that entailed creating practice sheets for reading, writing, and arithmetic. Finally, I would review my magical textbook. There was no class curriculum. I kept the pace easy so I wouldn't run out of things to teach over 5 years. My main principle was repetitive practice to make sure Eris and Ghislaine fully understood the material. I did the same thing when I taught Sylphiette. Reviewing magic was important too. I didn't normally chant spells to perform magic, so I would often forget the words. The only spells I had truly memorized were those for healing and basic poison magic. I never thought to bother memorizing offensive spells. This magic textbook was the same one I had back home. Eris and Ghislaine also had their own copies. It was first published almost 1,000 years ago and was a bestseller with numerous reprints. Before it existed, you had to find a master to teach you magic. Most of them only knew the basics of each school. So many people became students only to learn next to nothing. Though the book was now considered a bestseller, There weren't very many copies made at the time it was written. Even with enough copies for it to circulate well, those without an interest in magic would have simply ignored it. It wasn't until 500 years later that it finally started being distributed en masse. Suddenly, anyone could get their hands on a magical textbook cheaply, so the number of magicians increased greatly. It wasn't as though the world suddenly boomed with magicians, but in the kingdom of Azura at least, magic became a part of the curriculum for many noble families. Still, why did the number of magical textbooks suddenly increase? As I wondered, I looked at the back of the book. Printed there was the line, published by Renoa University of Magic. What a clever marketing scheme. In this way, my days as a tutor passed in the blink of an eye. Name, Eris B. Greyrat. Occupation, granddaughter of Fatoa's liege lord. Personality, fierce. Doesn't mind listening to what people have to say. Reading/writing. Can write the names of her family members. Arithmetic. Subtraction skills are unreliable. Magic. Figures she'll try her best at it. Fencing. Sword god style. Beginner tier. Etiquette. Can do a normal greeting. People she likes. Grandfather, Ghislaine. Chapter 4. Staff meeting and Sunday. Alpha year passed. Eris, who I thought had finally cooled down, began returning to her violent ways. Why, how, who did this? I panicked until I realized something. She had been given no breaks. It was after dinner when I called Ghislaine and the etiquette teacher to my room. The etiquette teacher didn't actually live with us. She lived in the city, so I had a butler send a message to her. First, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Rudeus Greyrat, I said. Edna Leylun. I teach Lady Eris about proper etiquette. I touched my hand to my chest and gave a light nod. She responded in kind, her movements more polished. Unsurprising, coming from an etiquette teacher. Edna had the face of a middle-aged woman whose wrinkles were just beginning to show. Her features were soft, and she had a kind smile that emanated warmth. Please, have a seat, I said, motioning to nearby chairs. Once they settled in, I offered them tea that I had the butler prepare. The reason I called you here today is to talk about Eris's lesson schedule. Lesson schedule? Edna asked. That's right. I hear that she currently has sword practice in the morning, free time in the afternoon, and etiquette in the evening. Is that correct? Indeed. Eris was currently learning 6 subjects: reading and writing, arithmetic, magic, history, swordplay, and etiquette. In modern terms, that would be language, math, home economics, social studies, physical education, and, well, etiquette. There were no clocks, so lessons stretched on, separated only by meals and snack time. The subjects were split over 3 time periods, like this: breakfast, studying, lunch, studying, snack time, studying, dinner, free time. There was no history instructor, so Philip apparently taught her in his free time. Since I came on, she began having evening lessons as well. So her entire day has been filled up, I said. That's right, Edna responded. Her studies have been progressing smoothly. The master is quite impressed. No doubt he was. It may look like it's going smoothly, but there's a problem here. Edna looked confused. A problem, you say? Yes. Her stress has been building since she studies every day without any breaks. Remarkably, so during arithmetic lessons. She was irritable the entire time. If she ran into difficult problems, she would take it out on me. It was dangerous. There was no telling when she might come after me for real. It was very dangerous. We managed to get through it for now, but she might eventually snap and run from her lessons again. Oh dear. Edna pressed her hand to her lips. Her expression said that she acknowledged that possibility. I had never seen one of her etiquette lessons before, but Eris seemed to take them seriously. It was a mystery to me why Eris seemed to like her. I continued. So I would like to give her a day free of lessons every 7 days. They had a calendar in this world, so they had a concept of what month and what day it was. They did not, however, have the concept of a week. There were rest days allotted throughout the year, but there was no such thing as a Sunday. 7. I used the number because I could remember it easily. Plus, it seemed that number was special in this world as well. It was said to be a good omen, which was why there were also 7 tiers in swordplay. In the remaining 6 days, we'll continue teaching her reading and writing, arithmetic, magic, history, swordplay, and etiquette. Edna raised her voice. May I ask one thing? Please do. If things are divided that way, then my lessons would be reduced. So then would my salary also? I cut her off before she could finish. You don't have to worry about that. I couldn't blame her for being concerned about money, and I hope no one else would either. After all, I was in this for the money as well. Anyway, I had already spoken to Philip and it wasn't a problem. We had monthly salaries, so we'd get paid regardless of weather. Chapter 5. The young miss turns 10. Another year passed. Eris's education was progressing smoothly. Her swordplay was so impressive that she became intermediate tier before her 10th birthday. That meant she could contend with the average swordsman. Ghislaine said that, even though she was just 9, she might rise to advanced tier in a few more years. Our young mistress was quite the genius. As for me, if asked directly, I would avoid your gaze. It seemed that I was no genius at swordplay. Eris's ability to read and write was, well, functional at least. Ghislaine, who had been deceived numerous times and even sold as a slave because she couldn't read, tried desperately to memorize everything. Unfortunately, Eris lagged when it came to arithmetic. It was her weak spot. There was no point in panicking though. I had no idea what she would grow up to do, but highly advanced math wasn't necessary in this world. She just had to master the 4 principles in 5 years. That was enough. Magic lessons had been proceeding apace, but it felt like we had hit a slight impasse. Through chanting, the two could perform most of the basic spells. Eris had mastered just about every school of magic besides Earth, but Ghislaine could only do fire spells. I wondered about the difference in their abilities, even though they were both taking the same class. Was Ghislaine just poor at water, wind, and earth spells? What I observed seemed to indicate so, but I couldn't be sure. At any rate, it was clear that just chanting spells out of the magic textbook wasn't enough for them to overcome this issue. Casting different schools of magic had come quite naturally to me, so I didn't know how to help them. I'd been making them practice silent casting recently, but the results were less than satisfactory. Sylphie was able to do it easily, so I wondered if it was an issue of age. Or perhaps Sylphie was just especially skilled. Maybe it was just a futile endeavor. It might be best to just move on to intermediate spells. But Eris and Ghislaine were both swordswomen, so it would better to have them master basic spells because they were more versatile. In the end, I decided to keep my lessons as they were. I wanted to believe they would be able to cast without chanting someday. Eris's 10th birthday was drawing close. A person's 10th birthday was a special one. It was customary for the nobility to host large parties for a child on their 5th, 10th, and 15th birthdays. On Eris's birthday, the large reception hall and conjoining courtyard were open to the party. Presents poured in from all over, and all the nobles of Roa were invited to attend. Since Soros was the boorish military type, the initial plan was for a self-service, standing buffet, until Philip intervened and turned it into a dance party to make it easier for the local, less wealthy nobles to attend. The manor was bustling with frantic movement. Maids with dog ears rushed to and fro in the hallways. Maids weren't supposed to run in general, but apparently this household let them do so when things got busy. Some were full-on sprinting even, fast enough that they could hit a transfer student as they were rounding the corner and send them rocketing to the moon. I kept to the edge of the hallway where I wouldn't get in their way. I had no real destination in mind. I was just going for a walk. That was right, a walk. I had nothing to do with the frantic bustle. Right now, Eris was preparing for her leading role in the party by taking special etiquette lessons, so our classes had been cancelled. Philip had requested that Eris at least make sure she act like a 10-year-old child without causing any shame to herself. Apparently, she didn't meet that standard because Edna, with a look of exhaustion, requested a drastic increase in the number of lessons with Eris. I honored Edna's request, and thus came days of Edna keeping Eris from morning till night for her special lessons. That left me completely unoccupied. Of course, I was attending the party as a house guest, as it was really Eris's celebration. There was nothing for me to do except stand in a corner and eat. Nothing special was required of me. I thought I should perhaps practice etiquette with my newfound freedom, but if I spent every day training, I would just wear myself out. Plus, I wanted to look around the manor while everyone was busy with preparations. This would be the first big event I'd attended. Surely there was someone around who could use my help. Although the only thing I could really do was taste test. Come to think of it, do birthdays here come with cakes? They didn't in Buena Village, but cakes apparently existed here. I had never seen one, but sometimes a person wanted to eat something sweet. With these thoughts in my mind, I headed for the kitchen. I could have asked about the existence of cake, but I really wanted to take a walk. If my fortune was good, I might also find some food samples for the party. Yeah, also I was hungry. Was it still not time for lunch? No more. Right then, the door in front of me banged open, and Eris came flying out. Her shoulders were hunched as she dashed down the hall at an impressive speed and disappeared around the corner. Edna came chasing after her. Young Mistress. She looked both ways and sighed when she saw no trace of Eris. She began yawning, only seeing me halfway through. She offered me a weak smile. Well, hello there, Lord Rudeus. It was a smile that begged for me to listen. Such an expression was rare for Edna. You must be exhausted, Miss Edna. I'm sorry you had to see that. I raised a hand as I approached her, and Edna bowed in a graceful movement. I put my hand to my chest and returned the bow. What's wrong? I asked. Well, this is a bit embarrassing, but the young mistress ran off. Well, yes, I knew that since I watched it happen. It was pretty incredible. She was gone in mere seconds. I was pretty good at running away myself, but I was nothing compared to Eris. Edna looked troubled as she put a hand to her cheek. You see, I have been teaching her dancing lately, but she just can't seem to get it right. Now every time I try to teach her, she runs off. I see, that is troubling. I understand how you feel. Mostly because she used to run from me too. Eris was the type who refused to do something she didn't like. Edna had it rough. Catching Eris was no easy feat. There's less than a month until her birthday. If things continue like this, she'll shame herself in front of her guests. Edna said it like that was such a terrible thing. But wasn't it a bit late for that? Eris already had a healthy reputation for being a violent little thing. Being unable to dance at a dance party seemed pretty far down the potential shame list. This is her 10th birthday. It's special. Becoming a laughingstock on that day seems far too cruel. Don't you think, Lord Rudeus? She kept glancing over at me. If she wanted something from me, I wanted her to say it explicitly. So what do you want me to do? If you wouldn't mind, Lord Rudeus, couldn't you persuade her for me? To come back for her dance lessons. There it was. Why did I agree to her request? Because I had nothing else to do, I suppose, and because of something Edna said. Becoming a laughingstock on that day seems far too cruel. In this world, there was a custom of large celebrations on your 5th, 10th, and 15th birthdays. Only those 3 times. It was tragic to imagine such a joyous day yielding nothing but painful memories. With a little effort from me, the day could be truly enjoyable. Without it, there would be nothing but sadness. If I had just studied a little harder back in my previous life, I could have gotten into a different middle school. Then those horrible things might never have happened. I might not have closed myself off from the world. Not that I thought Eris would do that, but she might end up with awful memories that would linger long after. With that in mind, I began looking for her. Fortunately, I found her immediately. She was behind the stables, lying her back atop a pile of hay. Humph! She exhaled with a foul look when she saw me. I climbed up and sat beside her. I heard you can't dance very well. Hua! She shoved me off the haystack with a kick. I managed to land safely and turned to guard myself. Eris was the type to always launch a follow-up attack. If I wasn't prepared, I'd have a drop kick coming at the back of my unprotected head. Or so I thought, but the follow-up never came. She just remained sprawled on the hay, staring up at the sky. I climbed back up and sat beside her. This time I grabbed onto the hay so I wouldn't be sent flying. Rather, that was my plan until I felt an impact on top of my head. Ouch! Her heel was perched on the crown of my head. There wasn't enough power behind it to be an axe kick, so it seemed she was just resting it there. She was in a foul mood, but didn't seem to have much energy. Won't you go back to practice? I don't need to know how to dance. I glanced at her. She was still looking up at the sky. But I won't dance on my birthday either, she proclaimed frankly. But there was no way the star of a dance party could forego dancing. I had never participated in one, but I knew she'd somehow be dragged into dancing in front of everyone when the day came. Why do I have to do something I'm not good at? She groused, lips pushing into a pout. I understood how she felt, but running away just made things worse for the future. Yeah, when you put it like that, it's kind of difficult to answer. What did I have to say to get her to understand? I knew she wouldn't listen if I just told her she would regret it. That was the logic of an adult with regrets. You had to experience the emotion yourself to understand it. You don't get it. You can do anything, she said. No, there are certainly things I can't do. There are. Of course. She didn't ask me what they were. Instead, she just looked at me with an expression that said she didn't believe me at all. But I do think that when you put in maximum effort towards something you're not good at, you'll feel that much more accomplished when you finally succeed. You think so? She continued staring at the sky, not looking the least bit convinced. I'll help out too. Why don't you give dance practice one more chance? I won't. That killed the conversation right there. I couldn't find any other words to say. It looked like it was impossible after all. Maybe I was better off asking Ghislaine for help. Of course, she probably wouldn't see the need to learn dancing either. Even I didn't see it. The only people who did were probably Edna and Philip. Maybe I should ask Philip? As I thought that, Eris removed her foot from my head. Then she kicked her leg hard, using the recoil to propel herself off the hay and onto the ground. Rudeus. Yes. I'm going back to my dance lessons. Come with me. Did what I said work? Or was she just being her usual, whimsical self? Whichever it was, she seemed to have found some motivation, so I was glad. Very well, young mistress. I followed her back to the dance hall. Helping with her lessons meant I was learning to dance myself. For things like this, you improve faster by having a partner. That said, I had never danced a day in either of my lives. My experience, at best, was limited to playing dancing games at the arcade during middle school, so I was a bit worried. Wonderful. You are truly skilled at this. Contrary to my expectations, I had already mastered some of the beginner steps. Dance was all about remembering the routine and matching your movements to the rhythm. My previous self may have struggled from utter lack of exercise, but my current self was pretty fit. The simplest of the steps didn't require much getting used to. Eris sulked when Edna complimented me. She had spent months working on this only to fail, so of course she felt bitter watching me master it so easily. I wasn't just learning to dance, however. I was observing Eris so I could figure out why she was struggling. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was that Edna was a terrible teacher. Well, not a terrible teacher exactly. She was probably average. It was her method of saying, do it this way, do it that way, and just memorize what I'm telling you. That was the problem. She never touched on why those things were necessary. The second reason was Eris's failing. Her steps were too fast and too sharp. Her personality and movements were well suited to the sword god style, but they were a drawback when it came to dancing. Where she should have been lightly moving her feet to the rhythm of the music, she instead rigidly maneuvered her body at top speed, falling out of sync with her partner. Eris had her own rhythm and instinctively disliked being interrupted. She maintained it protectively no matter the circumstance, so no one could disrupt her flow. It was an incredible ability on the battlefield, but it only held her back in dance. Dance was all about matching your partner. According to Edna, this was the first time she had ever encountered a student with absolutely no skill for dance. That wasn't the case, though. Moving so quickly meant that there was a sharpness to her movements. In a dance routine that required that, she could dance beautifully. So that was why her teaching style wasn't working. Though blaming Edna would not fix Eris's movements. Still, there was something that could be done. As I watched Eris clumsily move through her dance steps, I decided to try something. Eris, please close your eyes and try swinging your body to your own rhythm. She looked doubtfully at me. What are you planning, making me close my eyes? Lord Rudeus? Edna's gentle smile wavered. No, this isn't what you think. I'm not trying to kiss her, I thought defensively. How rude of you guys, accusing a gentleman like me. I'm going to use magic to help you dance. What? A spell for that exists? No, I said magic. There's no spell. It's more of a miraculous phenomenon. She tilted her head, but did as I asked. Her dancing followed the same rhythm I had seen so many times during our sword lessons. Quick, detailed, precise, but always irregular. Her movements were unreadable and naturally disrupted the rhythm of her opponent. I could never imitate them, not even if I wanted to. The rhythm of a natural egotist. I'm going to clap my hands now. Try to match that rhythm with your steps, as if you're dodging an incoming attack. As I said that, I began smacking my hands together in a regular beat. Eris matched the rhythm in quick, precise movements. I repeated that for a bit, calling out to her at certain intervals. Yes, yes. It was always right before I clapped. Eris would wait for a moment, then react as soon as she heard my hands come together. This is. Edna raised her voice in amazement. Eris had danced the steps correctly. She was still a bit too fast, but at least she matched the rhythm. Edna balled her hands into fists and with an unusually excited smile, yelled, You did it! You did it, young mistress. Eris opened her eyes, all smiles and joy, and said, Really? I continued my instruction, essentially raining on their parade. Okay, keep your eyes closed. You need to remember what you did just now. Remember it? I'm just watching for an opponent's feints and dodging them. That's right. This was the same thing we did during our sword lessons when we dodged Ghislaine's attacks. Each time she made a feint she would call out, Yes, so we would learn to dodge only the real attacks. Even Ghislaine's feints were full of murderous intent. In comparison, it was easy to tell by my voice when I was feinting or not. Incidentally, I had better results during that lesson than Eris did. Eris was too gullible, so she fell for the feints easily. Eris, you can use things you learn in one lesson in others. When you struggle with something, try to think about whether you have done anything similar in any of your other lessons. Chapter 6. Learning a Foreign Language. Eris became better behaved after her 10th birthday, stirred the demons into action. I thought Kishirika was some sort of name each emperor received as they took the throne, but apparently the emperor was immortal. Even if they died, they would revive hundreds of years later. Perhaps the reason they were called the Great Emperor of the Demon World was because they were a rank above the other dragon emperors. Either way, the demons made allies of the beast folk and sea folk, overwhelming the humans. The humans were driven into a corner. For 1,200 years ago, the Second Great Human-Demon War came to an end. The warmongering humans fought for 800 years without admitting defeat and finally forced their enemy back. This was thanks to the efforts of the legendary hero, Golden Knight Aldebaran. This guy was a total cheater. He routed over 10,000 men by himself. He defeated all the powerful demons he encountered and fought one-on-one with the Great Demon Emperor. His final attack was so powerful it created a hole in the Great Continent, splitting it into the Central Continent and the Demon Continent, with the Ringus Sea in between. One passage wrote that he was the human god himself. The only Aldebaran I knew was the one who would die if he used his own lethal technique. So it seemed this world's golden saint was made of tougher stuff. The whole bit about him splitting the continent sounded like a load of garbage, but it was true that the continent separated into two, forming a new ocean. A long-sought peace finally settled over the land once the continent split. For 1,200 to 1,000 years ago, time passed quickly after that. The world was at peace, but the demons were being driven from the central continent. The humans were a clever bunch, using diplomacy to corral all the demons onto the demon continent. The central continent's land was naturally lush and easy to live on, whereas the demon continent's land was barren and prone to magic accumulating in certain areas. By forcing the last of those foul demons onto the demon continent and blockading it, The humans were metaphorically slipping a silk cord around their necks and strangling them with it. This was all done with the cooperation of the other races, in the hopes there would never be another great human-demon war ever again. The demons most likely resisted this in some way. They were, after all, on the receiving end of a concerted attack. But whatever their reaction was, no war broke out. As a result, they soon became desensitized to the way they had been restricted from leaving their continent. In that harsh environment with scarce resources being fought over, civil war naturally broke out. This forged them into fierce warriors, but their numbers dwindled. 1,000 years ago, the demon god Laplace came into being. In the long history of demons, there were many demon kings and demon emperors, but there was only one who people referred to as the demon god. In a relative blink of the eye, Laplace rallied the demons and conquered the demon continent. The records from battles at that time turned into war chronicles that were passed down. Even now on the demon continent, Laplace is still treated like an idol. Laplace spent many years cultivating his empire, grooming his race to be tough and fierce. 500 years ago, the start of Laplace's military campaign. After many long years spent winning over the sea folk and beast folk, Laplace finally made his assault on the central continent. The humans were forced into a war far more brutal than any they had fought before. Laplace launched his invasion from the south, drawing all the humans' military power there. Then he set his WIRMS upon the land, making passage through the mountains impossible. After that, he took the humans by storm, attacking with a separate unit from the north, scattering his enemies. In a short time, he had gained total control of the north and the south. Then, from both directions, he pressed his assault on the western region. 400 years ago, forced into a corner, the humans took their last gamble. The 7 heroes convinced the sea folk to lift their blockade, then set out on the seas for the Milis continent. Milis had escaped the invasion for many reasons, such as the barrier around Holy Milis, its robust army of holy knights, and the topography that made it difficult for a large army to disembark. Part of the reason they were so isolated was also due to a great forest that covered the north. Now allied with the demons, the beast folk had taken control of the holy city of Milis. So the 7 heroes set about persuading them to their side. Or rather, the 7 went to the head of each clan, took their children hostage, and threatened them into cooperation. In the book it was written that the children cooperated willingly, but I wasn't deceived by such an obvious spin. It came to the day of the decisive battle. The last remaining kingdom of humans on the central continent, the kingdom of Azura, mounted all their effort for the final battle. Soon the 7 heroes came, leading the holy knights of Milis and the beast folk in an assault on Laplace's main stronghold. After a violent confrontation, 4 of the 7 heroes were dead, but they successfully sealed Laplace away and destroyed his closest companions. 3 heroes survived: the dragon king Eurupin, the northern god Kalman, and the armored dragon king Perugius. They were referred to as the 3 legendary demon god slayers, but they didn't slay anything. Though Laplace was defeated, the humans were greatly exhausted from the battle and couldn't keep up the fight anymore. Instead, they signed a treaty with one of the demon kings back on the demon continent, one that wasn't allied with Laplace and led a more moderate faction of the demons. The blockade on the demon continent was lifted. The demons could now freely travel to the other continents. According to the terms of the treaty, racial discrimination against demons was prohibited. It was like the United Declaration of Human Rights in my previous world. Present day, the deep-seated trend of discrimination against the demons continued, but things were mostly peaceful. From all of this, I understood a couple of things. Incidentally, part of the reason so much knowledge about this long history existed was because some species were immortal. This was the case for the great demon emperor Kishirika, as well as a few other demon kings. Perhaps there was some sort of magic that made them live forever. By learning about the history of this world, I also turned up some information about the other languages that existed here. The most commonly used ones were the human tongue, used on the central continent; the beast god tongue, used in the northern part of the Milis continent; the fighting god tongue, used on the Begarit continent; the sky god tongue, used on the divine continent; the demon god tongue, used on the demon continent; the sea god tongue, used throughout the seas. To distinguish them, the languages were named after the gods of the various races residing on different continents. Only the human language didn't use that convention, a decision that might incur their god's wrath. The humans who spoke the human tongue on the central continent were divided into 3 regions: north, west, and south. Each region's language had minor differences from the others, something like the difference between American and British English. My native tongue was the Western dialect of the human tongue. Apparently that dialect was mutually intelligible to those in the north, but in other regions it was best not to use it. Men from the Western region were thought to be wealthy, and wealth only attracted unwanted, sometimes unfortunate, attention. The Milis continent was also split between the north and the south. The north spoke the beast god tongue, while the south spoke the human tongue. As for the sea folk lived all over the waters of the world. I had heard the term fish people before, but never seen them in the city. On top of my regular monthly income, I made and sold figures, assisted Philip in managing the daily hiring of part-time workers, and sometime resold wares I had bought several months prior. With these little bits here and there, I managed to earn a small amount of coin. Unfortunately, that book I had wanted sold while I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't buy what wasn't for sale. I began thinking about using the money I had saved to buy something else. What could you buy with 4 gold coins? No, there's no need to spend it all at once, I reasoned. That was when a book in a language I didn't know caught my eye. After reading about the world's history and learning about its languages, I remembered how important it was to learn them, which was how I began learning a foreign language. I decided to start with Ghislaine's native language, the beast god tongue. I also wanted to learn the demon god tongue. I decided to send Roxy a letter in hopes that she might teach me, even if just a little. I turned 9. That meant 2 years had passed since I first became Eris's home tutor. I'd spent a year learning the beast god tongue. I had Ghislaine's assistance, but acquiring the language didn't take much time. There weren't many letters to memorize, and so long as you knew its grammatical pattern, it was easy to speak. I was terrible at foreign languages in my previous life, but this body seemed to be good at remembering things. Now, I was going to learn the demon god tongue. I bought a cheap book on the language. The owner of the bookstore prefaced the sale by telling me, "I have no clue what's written in here, just so you know." It was 7 gold coins, but I haggled the price down to 6. 3 months passed. My study of the demon god tongue wasn't making much progress. Translation itself was difficult. In fact, to be honest, I had no idea what was written in this book. If I at least knew its title, maybe I could have guessed at its contents from context and dug my way through. But I didn't know them, nor did I know the language, so I gave up. The reason the beast god tongue had been so easy for me to learn was partly because of Ghislaine, and partly because the book I was using told the tale of one of the beast folk heroes from the legend of Perugius. It was a side story, but so long as I had Legend of Perugius with me, I could pick out vocabulary easily. For the book in the demon god tongue, I had no idea whatsoever. How did archaeologists manage to decode languages anyway? They began with vocabulary, I thought. First, they sought out similar vocabulary words, then began hypothesizing meanings for those words. Probably. Anyway, right now I had no idea what parts were even vocabulary. Not a clue. Just as I was lost as to what to do next, Roxy's reply finally arrived. I had heard nothing in over a year. I was beginning to wonder if something had happened to my letter, or if she no longer resided at Chiron's royal palace. But finally a reply. I was happy enough just getting a letter from Roxy. I hope she was doing well. I restrained myself as I took the letter from the maid. A letter? It was more like a small package. A fairly heavy wooden box. Not quite that large, but around the size of a phone book at least. Inside the box was a letter and a thick book. The book had no title, but the cover was made of animal hide. It was like a phone book with a jacket on it. I decided to start with the letter. I smelled it before I opened it, and it was almost like inhaling Roxy's scent. To Lord Rudeus, I received your letter. I am sure you have grown greatly in this short time. My jaw dropped when I read that you became the home tutor for the grandchild of Fatoa's liege lord. If you must know, I failed the interview for that job. You must have some powerful connections to have landed that. If I weren't currently the home tutor for the king's son, I might be jealous. Still, you even became acquainted with Sword King Ghislaine, and became her pupil on top of that. Sword King Ghislaine is very famous. After all, she's the 4th strongest person. I was incredibly good at learning things in this one. I was sure that in 6 months I could perfectly master the contents of this book. At the very least, I wanted to be able to master basic conversation. It was time to put my nose to the grindstone. Ghislaine Rudeus had shut himself in his room. He was up to something again. He had a habit of surprising Ghislaine like that sometimes. When she first met him, she thought he was just a kid, and not at all dependable. She thought Paul was being an overconfident, too proud parent when he forced this kid on her. Ghislaine owed Paul. She had no feelings for him other than a sense of obligation. On the off chance that Rudeus failed to be appointed Eris's tutor, she still planned to propose that he stay here. In the end, he won over Eris's trust in record time and secured a place in the house as her tutor. The kidnapping was something he'd proposed. Ghislaine heard that the butler took advantage of the situation out of greed, but when she arrived on the scene to help Rudeus and Eris, he was already dealing with the 2 people hired by the butler on even footing. He managed to manipulate 2 different schools of magic in a unique fighting style, albeit an imperfect one, that overwhelmed his opponent, an advanced-tier North God-style swordsman. He did drop his guard at the end, perhaps because he was still a child, but his combat instincts were genius level for someone of his age. Even for Ghislaine, initiating battle with an opponent over 100 meters away would likely mean defeat. Beyond his fighting instinct, he was exceptional at organizing effective lessons for Eris that were easy to follow. Ghislaine never thought she would be able to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, or receive a wand. She, the village nuisance, who had been entrusted to some wandering swordsman before she had even turned 10. She who had been turned away from adventuring parties despite becoming a saint-tier swordswoman. When she finally managed to join one, she was continuously told by some not-too-bright, frivolous man that she had muscles for brains, so there was no point in wasting time thinking. What would those people say if she went home now? Just thinking about it brought her to the brink of a smile. Ghislaine never thought the day would come when thinking about people from her village would make her feel triumphant. And all this, unprecedented, from a boy who would be the same age as her son if she'd had one. After her party disbanded, Ghislaine was swindled almost every day. The defrauding left her penniless, but the strict discipline her master instilled in her against touching the belongings of others meant she couldn't turn to thievery. She was on the brink of starvation. That was when Soros and Eris took her in. Ghislaine paid Rudeus the same respect as she paid the two of them. If she went as far as calling him master, her sword master would probably fume at her. Don't you dare put me and that brat on the same level. It was probably best to call him her teacher instead, and Rudeus deserved respect for his skills as a teacher. He was truly patient when he taught her arithmetic and magic. Ghislaine tried her best, but she wasn't good at picking up new things. She made the same mistakes over and over. Despite that, Rudeus never showed the least bit of annoyance as he carefully explained things to her. He would change his phrasing each time to help her understand better. Thanks to his efforts, in 2 short years Ghislaine had mastered the basics of fire and water magic. And now, according to Rudeus's curriculum, she was not moving on to intermediate tier spells, but instead learning to cast spells without chanting. It was sound logic. If she could master that, she could use magic even when both hands were occupied. She understood that logic and was working hard to accomplish it. Granted, working hard at something didn't necessarily mean she would accomplish it. Ghislaine's sword master, who was a divine tier swordsman, was always preaching about logic. To her, he'd say things like, in other words, logic is the foundation. That his style of swordplay, cultivated over many years, was founded on rationality. Ghislaine's younger self detested the simplicity of the foundations, so her master went to great lengths to drill them into her. She was forced to practice them repeatedly. Rudeus's teaching style was very similar. When he wasn't around, Eris would often complain, "I want to use fancier magic." But Ghislaine was fine with how things were. In a real battle, the most reliable fighter wasn't the advanced magician who took forever to cast a powerful spell. It was the magician who could adapt to the situation and had full mastery of basic and intermediate level magic. In the past, she thought magicians were completely useless in battle. But after seeing Rudeus fighting, Ghislaine had changed her mind. An opponent who moved swiftly while using offensive magic to restrict his opponent's movements would be a formidable enemy for any sword fighter. She heard his only real match back in his village was Paul. Paul, who was immature, and surely came at Rudeus without holding anything back. If the result of that were Rudeus gaining the ability to move strategically in a sword fight, then that was a happy coincidence. So, Paul was good for something after all. Had he made one misstep, Rudeus might have quit fighting altogether and wasted his potential. Rudeus must have inherited that refusal to quit from his father. Ghislaine eventually wanted to teach him a technique to defeat Paul. Unfortunately, Rudeus had no talent for the sword god style. He overthought everything. He took the logical foundations of the style, tried performing them even more logically, only for the results to be completely illogical. It wasn't a bad thing, given his personality. He was most likely using magic as a basis for his swordplay. That was not, however, appropriate in the sword god style, where a single step decided everything, and a battle ended within a split second of swords crossing. He was more suited to the North god style or the Water god style, but it seemed Paul hadn't taught him either. Unfortunately, Ghislaine only knew the sword god style. She couldn't teach him herself, but she knew someone who could. If he still wanted to learn swordplay in 3 years, she would introduce him to someone who used the North god style. Right now, she could only continue teaching him the foundations of the sword god style. If he mastered them, he would see rapid improvement when he began learning the North god style. If he still wanted to learn swordplay by then, of course. He currently seemed at an impasse with magic since he had no master to teach him, but he would surely become an accomplished magician someday. Rudeus might not reach the divine tier, which seemed an almost inhuman feat, but he might reach the imperial tier. Ghislaine wondered how to guide him. Surely Roxy, his magic instructor, had struggled with the same question. She thought it a bit pathetic that the girl ran from the problem, but Ghislaine couldn't blame Roxy for doing that. In fact, she should probably thank Roxy. After all, it was through Roxy's instruction by proxy that Ghislaine learned to use magic herself. Learning from a stupid teacher only held a pupil back. She might get a taste of that bitterness while teaching someone else the sword someday. Her thoughts had veered off track. Ah yes. She wondered what Rudeus was doing in that room. Unlike the young mistress, who seemed overwhelmed with the free time her day off provided her, Rudeus was always sticking his fingers into something new. Most recently, he came to Ghislaine's room after dinner with a book in one hand, telling her that he wanted to learn the beast god tongue. She wasn't sure what he planned to do with a language that was only used in a large forest village, but he spent the next 6 months learning it. The beast god tongue didn't have any difficult expressions in it, so he could probably engage in a daily conversation. That by turning the tables on her, but for months afterward Eris's fiery gaze tracked Ghislaine, waiting for Ghislaine to drop her guard. Ghislaine used to be a troublesome child herself, so she felt a fondness for Eris. She was just like that when she was younger after all. In the beginning, Eris would always complain about this or that during training. Enthusiastically, if Eris continued training in earnest, she might one day surpass Ghislaine. Right now, her skill level was just intermediate tier, but after 3 years of working on the foundations, her potential was beginning to show. Her steps were sharp, fast. Her fighting spirit was beginning to drive her movements. If she learned how to use that consciously, she would definitely reach the advanced tier in the sword god style. If she mastered it completely, she could be saint tier. That future surely wasn't too far off. Ghislaine didn't know how much Eris would grow, but if she managed to attain saint tier skills while Ghislaine was still teaching her, then Ghislaine would let Eris meet her master. If possible, Ghislaine would take Rudeus along as well. Ghislaine wondered how her master would react to that. She was looking forward to it. Name: Eris B. Greyrat. Occupation: granddaughter of Fatoa's liege lord. Personality: a little violent. Does listen properly. Reading/writing. Improving with writing as well. Arithmetic: still bad with division. Magic: can't do any spells without chanting them. Fencing, sword god style. Intermediate tier, soon to be advanced tier. Etiquette: can imitate ladylike manners. People she likes: grandfather, Ghislaine, Rudeus. Chapter 7, Absolute Promise. After all of that, I finally turned 10. I dedicated most of the last 2 years to language studies. Besides the beast god tongue and the demon god tongue, I also learned the fighting god tongue. It was extremely close to the human tongue, so it was easy, somewhat like the similarity between the German and English languages. The basics of grammar were the same as the human tongue. The only differences were expressions and vocabulary. The languages in this world weren't that difficult. Once you learned one, you could use it as a basis for learning the others. Probably a side effect of all the warring between the races. However, there was no literature in either the sky god tongue or the sea god tongue, nor any people who used those languages around here, so I was unable to learn them. Oh well, speaking 4 languages was more than enough for me. As for swordplay, my skills were approaching the intermediate tier. In just 2 years Eris had gone from intermediate tier to advanced tier, so I was no longer any match for her. You could really feel the gap in our abilities. Oh well, I thought. It seemed she spent her days off training really hard, so that's how it goes. While I spent my free time learning languages, she spent hers with the sword. The gap between us was only natural. As for magic, I only practiced through making figurines. I was able to make them more and more detailed, which probably meant I was improving. It was true that I had hit a wall though. Of course, that would be solved once I began learning at the Magic University. There was no use in being impatient. 10 years had passed since I came into this world, huh? The thought made me a bit emotional. As my birthday was about a month away, the people in the manor began growing restless, Eris especially so. What is it, I wondered? Was someone important supposed to be coming? Like someone else from the Greyrat family? Or perhaps Eris's fiancé? No way, it couldn't be. Eris with a fiancé? I felt like a fit of strange laughter might burst out of me. But the restlessness made me anxious, so I decided to investigate. After doing a magnificent job of tailing Eris, I spotted her chatting happily with a maid in the kitchen. Ghislaine was there too, but she hadn't noticed me. The brawny, animal-eared swordswoman was distracted by the meat that had been set out for our next meal. I can't wait to see the look of surprise on Rudeus's face. He might even weep with joy. I'm not certain about that. It is Lord Rudeus we're talking about. Even if he felt surprised, he might not let it show. But you do think he'll be happy, right? Eris asked. Yes, of course. As part of the branch family, I'm sure he's had a rough time of it. I hadn't really had a rough time of anything. But what exactly were they talking about? Were people gossiping about me? I was fairly confident I had done a fine job of being good. But perhaps I was the only one who thought so, and the other people of this house actually found me unpleasant. If that were the case, I was confident I would weep. Specifically, confident I would create more work for the maids by using my pillow as a tissue to soak up all my tears. I have to make sure it's ready in time. Eris said, being impatient won't make things go well. If I can't make it well, you think he won't eat it? No, Lord Rudeus would eat anything you made for him, the maid responded. Really? Yes, as long as Lord Soros is present. Oh, I knew what this had to be. Preparations for a surprise party, huh? If only Rudeus hadn't been born to that house. There was pity in Eris's voice as she said that. Now that I knew what the conversation was about, I decided to take my leave. It turned out that I was someone who had to be kept from the public eye. In the past, I might have thought they wanted to hide me because of who my father was, but now I knew it wasn't that. This was something I had learned in the past couple of years. Paul's real name was Paul Rudeus Greyrat. Rudeus was the name of Paul's noble family. A long, long time ago, Paul was disowned by the Rudeus household, and his cousin or younger brother became the head of the household in his place. That was fine, it was the past. Except that there were those who wouldn't, or rather, didn't, want to leave things in the past. Those in power were full of paranoia. Worst case scenario, they might send assassins after me. That was why it was necessary to hide me. Ordinarily, I should have been treated as more important than Eris since I was a boy, but instead I was being treated like a servant. Even the 10th birthday celebration, one of the most important noble customs, had to be limited in scale for me. That's why everyone kept saying, "Poor thing, how awful." That was why Eris had gone to her grandfather for the first time in a long while to request a secret party for me. One just for the people in the manor. A modest home party especially for me. Still, that was close. I was glad I eavesdropped, because although I knew about the customs here, a 10th birthday was nothing special to me. In fact, my own idea of a party was a house party, not that gigantic celebration that Eris had for her birthday. If someone had told me they were going to throw me a birthday party, my reaction would be pretty flat. Like, "Oh really? Thanks," or similar. But this was Eris's idea. I was the only one her age around here, so this was the first time she'd done something like this. If I didn't act excited about it, she would be disappointed. I decided to practice making fake tears with water magic, because I was a man who knew how to read the situation. My birthday. I pretended I didn't notice how anxious everyone in the manor was. Once afternoon lessons ended, and we had our break, Ghislaine came to my room. She was unusually nervous, her tail standing sharp and rigid. There's some magic I want you to teach me." Her gaze, which was usually unwavering, was suddenly shifty. Apparently, she wanted to keep me in this room. Okay. I would board this train. "Oh? Like what?" I asked, knowing whatever answer she gave was surely planned. She looked me dead in the eyes and in a very serious voice replied, "Will you show me what Saint Tier magic looks like?" "Sure, but it will damage the city." "What? Just what kind of magic is it?" "Saint Tier water magic involves gale force winds and a lightning storm. If I try hard enough, I can probably submerge the entire city." "That's amazing. I would like you to show me that next time then." She was oddly excited about it. That must have been part of the plan. All right then, let's tease her a little. If you're that interested, let's do it. If we ride out about 2 hours, we should get a safe distance away. Let's leave now. Her cheek twitched. 2 hours. And no, wait. If we leave now, we'll get back late. Monsters come out at night. Even the planes aren't safe. Really? But we should be fine so long as you're there. You said before that beast folk are sensitive to sound, so you're just as vigilant at night as you are during the day, right? That's true, but it's never good to overestimate yourself. True. Plus, I'd use an awful lot of magic when casting Saint Tier spells. Let's do it on our next day off then. Yes, all right. That's good. Let's do that. I found a good spot to drop that conversation. Normally, nothing could fluster Ghislaine, so teasing her like this was pretty entertaining. Her tail went rigid when she lost her composure too. Just one word from me made it twitch. That alone was enough to amuse me. "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't pour you any tea. Let me go get some hot water." "No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't move. I'm not thirsty." "All right then." I could actually make the hot water myself, but she didn't seem to realize that, so I kept it to myself. I could see she would do whatever she could to keep me in here. Maybe it was time for a little sexual harassment. By the way, this is one of the figures I made recently. From my shelf, I took a 1/10 scale figure of Ghislaine that I was still working on. I was confident I had improved a lot since I first started making them. The sculpting of the musculature alone was professional work. Ghislaine let out a small breath as she looked at it. "Is this me? You've gotten pretty good at this. You did a nice job before when you were making one of Lady Eris, but this one is... There's no tail. Unfortunately, I only have a vague understanding about tails. I usually create these from my imagination, but this time I'm being very picky because I want it to look as close to the real thing as possible." Her tail twitched as if she were deep in thought. I'm looking forward to seeing just what kind of face you'll make," I thought. "Would you let me see yours? The base of your tail, that is." "No problem," she said. She turned around and pulled her pants off. She didn't even hesitate. Right in front of me was her firm, muscular behind and the base where her tail attached. Amazing. I knew it would be. She's so fearless. There's no winning against her, I silently gushed. No, I couldn't falter, not here. Ghislaine always had her guard up, but right now my curiosity overcame me. See, could I touch it for just a moment? Sure. Go ahead. It's hard, I thought. Wait a second, this is her ass, right? Right? It was as hard as steel. Yet at the same time, there was a certain softness to it. The ideal bow. After a few moments I sniffed. I am sorry. This is the first time since I came here. I kept thinking I couldn't screw up, that I wasn't welcome here, that if I screwed up, it would just cause issues for my father. I never thought you all would celebrate like this for me. Sniff. I lifted my sleeve to check out their reactions, only to see Eris looking gobsmacked. Philip and Soros and all the others in the room had ceased clapping. They all stood with their mouths agape. Crap. Was my acting too corny? I wondered. No, that wasn't it. It was the opposite. It was too good. I screwed up. I should have acted with moderation. Sigh. I really was a terrible adult for concocting this plan in the first place. Oh well. Too late. Best to continue as I had planned. Flustered, Eris turned to the butler asking, "What should I do?" Were my tears that big a deal? Her reaction was so cute that I put my arms around her. Then, in a nasally voice, I whispered words of gratitude in her ear. "Eris, thank you. And no big deal. Why your family after all? It's obvious I'd do this. This is nothing to the Greyrat family. All right, father, grandfather." Normally, she'd say something like, "You better be grateful." But instead she was making excuses and looking to Philip for backup. That was when Soros rose up, barking, "War. We'll go to war with Nodos. We'll kill Paimon and install Rudeus as the head of the family. Philip, Alphonse, Ghislaine, follow me. Let's gather the troops." And thus dawned the inter-family war between the Boreas Greyrat and Nodos Greyrat households. It was a bloody feud that enveloped the remaining two Greyrat branch families as well, pulling the whole of the Azura kingdom into what would become a long, drawn-out civil war. No, of course not. That didn't happen. Father, restrain yourself. Please, restrain yourself. Philippe, do you plan to stand in my way? You bastard. Surely you, too, think Rudeus would be a more fitting head of household than that ridiculous buffoon. Yes, of course I do, but calm down. Today is a day of celebration. Plus, war isn't a good thing. We would be making enemies of both Zephyros and Euros. You fool. I'll defeat everyone by myself. Release me, release me. Soros left the room, dragging Philip behind him. Even after he was gone, I could still hear his voice. I was dumbfounded. Ahem. Eris cleared her throat once. Leaving grandfather aside for the moment, I prepared something for today that will surprise you, Rudeus. She flushed red as she giggled and puffed out her chest in pride. It was adorable. She recently began wearing bras now that her breasts had started growing. Right now, they were just cute, but someday they would grow into something incredible. Or so said the wise old hermit. Thanks, wise old hermit. Something that will surprise me? I echoed back. What do you think it is? Something that would surprise me. What could it be? Something that I would enjoy. A laptop and an erotic game? No. I had to think of something that Eris seemed likely to come up with. I considered my current situation. I was away from my parents and had been alone for several years. She probably thought I was lonely, especially since it was my birthday. If it were Eris, what would she want? For Ghislaine or her grandfather to come celebrate with her, right? If I applied that to me, then don't tell me my father's here. Her face clouded over as soon as I said that. Not just hers, but the maids' and butlers' faces as well. It was a look of pity. An incorrect guess. And Mr. Paul couldn't come because monsters have become more active in the forest lately, he said. But he said you didn't need him here anyway. As for Miss Zenith, she said the two young ones suddenly fell ill with a fever, so she couldn't come either. Eris gave a choppy explanation. Oh, so, they did invite them. Well, it couldn't be helped. The village relied on Paul quite a bit, and if both the girls were sick, Zenith couldn't leave their care solely to Lilia. It would have been nice to see them again, since it had been so long, but oh well. You, Rudeus. You know, Eris started stumbling over her words again. It was cute, like a cat that got itself into trouble after acting so tough all the time. But don't worry, I thought. It's better if Paul's not here. Oh, I see. So my father and mother didn't come then. I meant to sound like I didn't mind, but since I had just stopped crying, my voice was all nasally. I probably sounded completely dejected instead. One of the maids sniffled. I'd screwed up big time. I hadn't meant to make the atmosphere so glum. Sorry, guys, looks like I can't read the atmosphere after all. Just as I thought that, Hilda dashed over and took me in her arms. I dropped the bouquet of flowers I was holding by accident. Arg, I barely spoke with Hilda. She had the same red hair as Eris and had the aura of a widow still at the prime of her youth, radiating raw sexuality. Someone who might appear in an erotic game with young wife or widow in the title. Of course, she wasn't a widow so long as Philip was alive. She shouted as she squeezed me tightly. It's all right, Rudeus, you can calm down. You're part of our family now. Huh, didn't she hate me? I won't hear any complaints. You'll be our adopted. No, marry Eris. That's right. That's a great idea. Do that. And mother, Hilda had taken leave of her senses. Marriage, she said. Even Eris was surprised. Eris, do you have a problem with our Rudeus? He's only 10. Age has nothing to do with it. Now stop making excuses and spend that time refining yourself as a lady. That's what I'm doing. Hilda was on a rampage, with Eris firing back. I was told she married into the family, but I guess she was still a Greyrat through and through. She had the same wild presence as Soros. Okay, let's do this some other time. Arg, darling, what are you doing? Unhand me. That poor child, I have to save him. Philip gracefully escorted his wife from the scene after he returned from restraining Soros. Whenever a situation developed, he would address it with glacial composure while everyone else stood dumbfounded. He was cool, like a master magician. A man you could rely on, someone you could consult with about anything. So what is it? The surprise you were talking about? I inquired, after picking the bouquet off the floor. Eris folded her arms, puffed out her chest, and stuck out her chin. It had been a while since I last saw this pose. Alphonse, bring it here. She snapped her fingers as if to make a sharp, assertive sound, but it came out dull and flat. Her cheeks flushed, but Alphonse seemed unperturbed as he produced a staff from the shadows of a sculpture. A staff, the same one that Roxy had used. A magician's staff, one made of gnarled, knobby wood. At its tip was a large, costly-looking magical crystal. The moment I saw it, I knew. That staff was expensive. I knew because I had made 2 wands myself. The rank of a staff was determined by the wood and the stone at its tip. Each type of magic had a certain affinity with different types of wood. Fire and earth spells matched best with persimmon wood, while water and wind matched best with pagoda wood. But even if the affinities didn't match, it didn't mean the power of a spell was diminished. The important thing wasn't the wood, but the magical crystal. Channeling magic through the crystal increased the potency of a spell. There were many grades of crystal, but the larger and more transparent, the more effective it was. A crystal's price increased astronomically with its effectiveness. The crystals I used to make Eris and Ghislaine's wands were worth a silver coin apiece. There were cheaper ones, but I remembered the approximate size of the wand Roxy gave me and selected something similar. They were about as big as the tip of my smallest finger. This one was as big as a fist and was easily worth over 100 gold coins, especially with its ultramarine hue. A crystal with color to it greatly increased the potency of its magic. Just how much did she spend on that thing? I wondered. Incidentally, the magic-imbued crystals found in labyrinths didn't have an amplifying effect. Instead, they carried magic power of their own, so they were either used in magical items or used to supplement a person's mana cost when using a powerful spell. It seems you've taken a liking to it, Eris said with a nod of satisfaction as I examined it. Alphonse explained, Yes, my lady. Birthday that each region of the Azura Kingdom had its own form of alcohol. In this area, it was largely made from wheat, but wine from grapes would be prepared for special occasions. Philip hadn't talked much during the party. He had admonished Soros and Hilda, but otherwise spent most of the time watching over us with a smile on his face. It was now, when the 2 of us were left alone, that he let the words flow. I lost the battle to become head of the family. Right now, Eris is my only child. So, it was going to be a serious conversation. I adjusted my posture and gazed intently at him. Don't you wonder why it is that Eris has no brothers or sisters? I nodded quietly. A little. I was curious, but I was never able to ask about it. The truth is, it's not that she doesn't have any. She has an older brother and a younger brother. Her younger brother is probably about the same age as you, I think. Was he killed in the battle to become head of the family? Philip looked at me, shocked. I'd asked the question a little too directly. No, of course not. He's not dead. He was taken to the imperial capital by my elder brother as soon as he was born. Taken? What do you mean? I pressed. On the surface, he took him there as an adopted son to let him study. The truth is, it's a tradition, I suppose. Philip explained the Boreas family's tradition, one that was connected to the battle to become the head of family. Soros had 10 sons. Among them, only 3 were exceptional. Philip, Gordon, and finally, James. It sounded like the name of a certain locomotive. To decide who would be the head of family among these 3, they were made to compete. The result was that James would become the next head of the family. Philip and Gordon had lost. During the first half of the power struggle, James first secretly pulled Gordon and the daughter of the Rudeus Greyrat family together. He maneuvered things so neither one would know the other's background, then fanned the flames of their love. Gordon became too focused on that romance, and just as James had planned, married into the Rudeus branch of the family. That effectively cut off his path to becoming head of the Boreas family. In the latter half of the struggle, Philip and James were evenly matched. They continued to fight by manipulating people from behind the scenes. But it wasn't like some dramatic development occurred. The battle simply ended with Philip's defeat. It was a matter of influence. James was 6 years older than Philip, widely known throughout the capital, and had served as a minister's aide. He had connections, money, and, more than anything, political power. Philip was an excellent candidate, but that 6-year gap was nearly impossible to overcome. Once James became the head of the household, he made Philip the mayor of Roa. At that time, Philip had yet to give up. He tried to formulate a comeback strategy, but the lands in Fitoa were largely rural, making it difficult to build political power. While Philip was breaking his back trying to do what he could, James stayed in the capital and built himself a rock-solid position as minister. That made the gap between them impossible to bridge. Then, when Philip's son was born, James claimed him as an adopted son. Isn't it a bit tyrannical of him to take all of your sons from you? No, it's fine. That's the tradition. In the Rudeus Greyrat line, all sons born into the family were raised under the care of the head of the household. This prevented those who had lost in previous power struggles from participating in future ones. It ensured they would not involve themselves to boost their own son's influence in the next struggle for power. This was a common issue, a problem that occurred all over Azura Kingdom. Apparently, the Euros family which Gordon married into had a different tradition, but Philip obeyed the Boreas tradition and surrendered all his sons to James while they were still young and had no awareness of the world. The only father they would recognize was James. The situation would have been reversed if I had won. The way Philip calmly accepted the situation made me think he may not have been Soros's true-born child after all. The same could not be said for his wife. Hilda was from a normal noble family. Having her newborn baby taken from her wasn't something she could so calmly accept. In the aftermath of losing her oldest son, she fell into depression for quite a while. Once Eris was born, she seemed to recover, but when Eris's younger brother was taken, she became unstable again. She hated you. After all, why did the son of an outsider get to parade around here as if he owned the place, when her own sons couldn't even do that? I had already figured out that she hated me. At least now I knew she had a reason for it. Plus, our only remaining child, Eris, turned out to be a tomboy instead of a lady. I thought all hope was lost. What do you mean by that? It would be difficult to try to use Eris to overthrow James. By overthrow did he mean? He still hadn't given up on becoming the head of the family. But lately, after seeing you, I've started to feel a little bit of hope. Your acting is good enough to deceive even Hilda and my father. So, he noticed I was putting on a show. But the word deceive didn't have a very nice ring to it. I just tried to act in a way that wouldn't make things unpleasant. Philip continued, you understand the importance of money, and you know how to be diplomatic. And you don't balk at the necessity of putting yourself in harm's way to win over people's hearts. He was probably referring to the kidnapping incident, or the fact that I stuck around even though someone my age, Eris, was punching me all the time. But most of all, Eris has grown tremendously under your supervision. Philip sounded like he could never imagine this. He had heard how exceptional I was from Paul, but as the son of someone who spent all his time flipping skirts at my age, he probably thought I would be the same type of delinquent. He figured something interesting might happen by pitting his unruly daughter against me, like observing the chemical reactions of a science experiment. Apparently, that was about as far as he'd imagined it. I can still remember the day when Paul came running here crying. Philip muttered to himself. I asked Philip to explain, who said Paul came crying because he was going to get married but didn't have the money to afford a place and needed a stable job. Yet at the same time Paul didn't want to return to his noble family. Apparently, he got on his knees for my sake, something he didn't do even when the incident with Lilia happened. Well, that was in the past anyway. Wouldn't Eris have found a way even without me here? Found a way? Of course not. Even I thought Eris was hopeless. I thought she had no future as a member of a noble family. That was why I hired Ghislaine to teach her swordplay so that she might at least become an adventurer. After he said that, Philip recounted several of his past episodes with Eris, every single one painful to listen to. So how about it? Paul's bad reputation truly was loathsome. I'll pretend you said all this because you're drunk. Philip laughed quietly when I said that. That's right, go ahead and do that. All that stuff about the Boreas family aside, you're free to pursue whatever relationship you want with Eris, you know? I have no responsibility for her. Even if I did marry her off, she would surely come right back. I would prefer to hand her over to you instead. Another muted laugh. If he married Eris off, she would probably punch her husband to death within a couple of days. I could picture it easily. Just as easily as I could picture myself dancing to Philip's tune if I took him up on that offer. All right, it's about time to sleep then. Yes, good night, I responded. So ended the birthday party that Eris had staged for me. Chapter 8, The Turning Point. Hyrone Kingdom. Roxy Migurdia looked out the window with her brows knitted. The color of the sky was strange. Brown, black, purple, and yellow. A change of colors one didn't usually see. And yet, she had seen these colors somewhere before. What is it, I wonder? The hues were familiar to her, but she had never seen the sky like this before. The only thing clear was that this wasn't a natural phenomenon. The most likely explanation was magic that, for whatever reason, had gone out of control. The scale of it was such that she could see it whirling even from a distance. Then she remembered. The way it shone, she had seen this before at the University of Magic. The light looked like summoning magic. That direction, in the east. Azura Kingdom? Don't tell me it's Rudeus. She remembered the boy she had once taken as a pupil. That boy who, at the tender age of 5, produced a storm while utterly composed. Now he would be 10. At half his age, he had complete control of his bottomless pool of mana, so it was possible he might do something like this. In his most recent letter, he wrote of his difficulties studying summoning magic. Maybe he had somehow obtained a book on it, or perhaps found a teacher. "You're wide open." As she was deep in thought, someone threw their arms around her from behind. As her breasts were grabbed, she felt something hard press against her thighs. Itchin and ngh. Roxy was fed up. No matter how he groped her, the thickness of her robes masked everything. Besides, even if he got pleasure out of doing this, the only thing she felt was displeasure. "Raging flames consume my body. Burn in place." Jaya. The force of the flames that covered her body sent the person behind her flying. She still couldn't cast spells without chanting them at all, but she had shortened the length of her spells greatly in these past 5 years. When she learned that Rudeus was teaching his own pupils to cast spells without chanting, she decided to practice shortening her own incantations. It hadn't been easy. Just how much was that boy genius expecting from his pupils? Not everyone was as blessed with talent as he was. Roxy turned and gazed at the boy collapsed on the floor. "Your Highness, you can't come up behind a woman and just start groping her chest." "Roxy, were you trying to kill me? I'll have you thrown in prison." Chiron Kingdom's 7th prince, Pak Chiron, was a kid with a bad attitude who had just turned 15. His bad behavior was endearing at first, but lately he had developed a real interest in sex and would make sexual advances toward Roxy every afternoon. "My apologies. I didn't realize such a weak attack would be fatal. You must have the constitution of an insect." "Grr. Criminal disrespect. I won't forgive this. If you want my forgiveness, then roll up your robes and let me see your panties." "I'll pass." He had already put his hands on multiple maids, leaving the king troubled over how to handle the situation. Now it seemed he had turned his attention to his curt household tutor. Just what about a rude girl like her did he find appealing? Roxy didn't understand. Still, no matter how much he came at her, she had no reason to obey his commands. According to the contract she made with the country's governing party, no matter what selfish demands the prince made, it was up to her discretion on how to handle him. There weren't many living in this castle that would obey his orders directly. Besides, he was the 7th prince. He was low in the line of succession, so he had next to no authority. In fact, if you looked at the privileges afforded to them, Roxy was in a much higher position as an imperial court magician. The prince tried a different approach. "Roxy, I already know. I know that you have a lover." "I see. And just when did I manage to do something as incredible as finding a lover?" She replied to his sudden gibberish, tilting her head. A lover? She did want one at some point, but she had yet to meet her ideal match. Even if she did, with the way she looked as a member of the Migurd race, he surely wouldn't reciprocate. She had already given up. The prince was odd himself, which was probably why he wanted a taste of her body, even if just once. But Roxy had no intention of being so easily seduced. "Hey, I slipped into your room and found all those letters you had piled up in the back of your shelf. I don't know what kind of backwoods peasant he is, but with my power, I could have him crushed. If you don't want to see him face a cruel execution, you better become my woman." So this was his other method. He would take hostage the lover of the person he was interested in, then demand the object of his affection submit to him to keep their lover safe. After that, he would take her in front of her lover, just so he could feel empowered by dominating another person. He had no such authority, yet he was still the prince of a country. He had some troops of his own that he could do what he wanted with, and there was a rumor that he had taken one maid's lover hostage before. Such poor taste. All he does is creep me out, Roxy thought. I'm glad I don't have a lover. All those letters were from Rudeus. Rudeus, who was a respected pupil and not her lover. Feel free to do so, she told him. What? I really will do it, you know. If you want to apologize, you better do it now. If you do it now, all you'll have to give me is your body. The prince clearly wasn't thinking. He didn't even know Rudeus's location in the first place. Based on his attitude, he hadn't read the contents of any of those letters either. If you can actually succeed in doing something to Rudeus, then you can have your way with my body. What are you acting so confident for? You should know what kind of power I have. Of course she knew. She knew that the little bit of power afforded to him as a prince of the royal family was barely worth snorting at. Rudeus is under the protection of the Boreas family, an elite noble family in Azura Kingdom. Boreas? As if nobles could stand up to the authority of a member of the royal family. He didn't even know the names of the elite royal families in Azura Kingdom. That realization prompted a sigh from Roxy. Had the other tutors even taught him anything? As the four great regional liege lords, the Nodos, Euros, Zephyroth, and Boreas families were of great renown. When the Azura Kingdom entered battle, they were the ones standing on the front lines. They had been military men for generations upon generations. Besides, members of those elite noble families might occasionally travel to Chiron on diplomatic engagements. Those names were definitely worth remembering. The country of Azura is 10 times the size of Chiron. To take the child of an elite noble family on some baseless suspicion and escort them to the gallows, you would have to possess a tremendous amount of political power and strategic skills. That's impossible for you, Your Highness. I'll have him assassinated. I'll send my Imperial Guards. Imperial Guards? Roxy sighed inwardly. He really wasn't thinking this through at all. There's no way your guards could cross the country's border. Even if they could, and the chance would be 1 in a million, the Boreas family has invited Sword King Ghislaine to their house as a guest. You truly think they could sneak into the citadel of Roa, into the Boreas manor, slip past Ghislaine's watchful eye, and assassinate a master magician? Jeeger. The prince ground his teeth together and stomped his feet. Roxy let yet another sigh slip past her lips. I can't believe this. He's already 15, and he doesn't even know the first thing about distinguishing between what's possible and what's not. Roxy heard that Rudeus's pupil, Eris, had been an uncontainable wild animal 3 years ago, but had recently become more refined. Meanwhile, her student was in this sorry state. Years ago, she had found him endearing and even recognized his talent for magic. Unfortunately, as soon as he realized what kind of power he had, his will to improve vanished, and he spent the better part of his lessons sleeping. Now she saw no potential in him. Anyway, I'll be quitting my position as your tutor soon, so you wouldn't make it in time even if you sent assassins out right this very minute. As soon as she said that, he raised his voice in shock. What? I haven't heard a word about this. You must not remember then. The agreement from the beginning was that she would work as his tutor until he reached maturity. At the time, she had considered requesting to stay beyond her contract. However, there were many in the royal palace who resented her presence. Leaving was the wisest course of action. It's a good opportunity as well, she added. A good opportunity for what? There's something strange about the western sky. Now I can go see it for myself. What the heck? She didn't say it was because she wanted to see Rudeus's face after all this time. It would only enrage the prince if she did. I still need you. We're still in the middle of our lessons, right? Irrelevant. You sleep through them anyway. That's your fault for not waking me up then. Oh really? Then as a bad teacher, I should take my leave quickly. Please be sure to hire someone who will wake you next time. I'm not interested. This prince is impossible for me, Roxy thought. I can't stop comparing him to Rudeus. All I had to do was teach Rudeus one thing, and he would take that, study it, and learn 10 or 20 new things. Maybe I can't be a teacher again after meeting a student like that. And thus, Roxy left Chiron and set out on her journey. She was accosted by the 7th prince and his personal guards on her way out, but swiftly repelled them. Afterward, the 7th prince obstinately insisted that she should be apprehended and brought before him to answer for the unforgivable act of violence she committed against him. However, the king refused to pay his claims any heed. Instead, the prince was rebuked and severely punished for being unable to convince the Water King tier magician Roxy Migurdia to stay. Roxy was not the only one to notice the change in the sky. Every person in every part of the world took notice both of its abnormality and the abruptness of its appearance. Even those of wide renown took note. The red WRM Mountains he dragon god Orsted gazed up at the western sky. Mana is pooling there? What is it? What's caused this madness? He scowled with suspicion. No matter. I'll know once I see it for myself. He headed straight west, passing over the corpse of the red WIRM he had just slain with a single attack. Other red WIRMs were swarming the area like a drove of insects, but not a single one tried to involve themselves. They knew what manner of being walked the ground below them. They knew that even if they banded together to attack, they would only be killed. They also knew that if they stayed clear, they would be safe. That being was the dragon god, a being that existed outside the rules of this world, a being they could not touch. Full of pride, another young WIRM that didn't understand its place in the world descended upon Orsted. In a split second it was rendered into nothing more than a lump of meat. Red WIRMs were dreadfully strong creatures that resided on the central continent. It was not just their battle prowess that made them fearsome, but also their intelligence. That was why they knew he was the man rumored to be the strongest in the world, and an opponent they could not hope to defeat no matter how much their numbers favored them. Orsted moved slowly down the mountain as the red WIRMs watched, his intentions a secret that only he was privy to. The floating fortress he armored dragon Perugius, one of the 3 legendary heroes, looked down at the northern sky. What is that? It looks like the light emitted when the great emperor of the demon world revives. Standing nearby was a woman with a white crow's mask over her face, a member of the skyfolk who possessed black wings. She whispered, "The mana level is different." Indeed, if anything, it resembles the color of a summoning. Yes, but that said, I've never seen that much light from a summoning before. It's similar to when we created Chaos Breaker. Perugius had to act. He had spent today just like any other, seated atop his throne in Chaos Breaker, attended by his 12 followers, continuing to monitor the surface. He had only one objective, to vanquish his loathsome enemy, the demon god Laplace, as soon as they revived. He waited in the sky for that moment when the seal would come undone. Could it be that the great emperor of the demon world is trying to unseal Laplace? It's possible. The emperor has been unsettlingly quiet in the 300 years since their revival, she responded. All right, Aramanthi, I am here. A man swathed in white and wearing a yellow mask appeared and kneeled before Perugius. Search immediately and, I'm certain whoever is behind this must be up to something. If you see anyone suspicious that seems to be involved with this, kill them. Understood. The armored dragon Perugius made his move, his 12 retainers behind him, all to avenge the 4 friends that he had lost. This time, for certain, he would deal the demon god Laplace a finishing blow. The sword Sanctum T, he sword god Galfalion gazed up at the southern sky. What's wrong with the sky? Also, the moment his focus shifted to something else, 2 of his beloved pupils launched an attack on him at the same time. Don't come at me while I've got my attention on other things. His composure was relaxed. In comparison, both of his beloved pupils were short of breath. As usual, the 2 had no sense, he thought. They were overconfident from having earned the title of Sword Emperor, yet this was all it amounted to. What a load of crap. Fame had no place in swordplay. All you needed to do was get stronger. The only thing fame brought you was money and political power. There was no value in that. Anyone could obtain those things. Being as great as he was, he could cut right through that garbage in a single stroke. If you were strong, you could have things your way. Having things your way was how you stayed alive. Ghislaine understood that best, but she had grown soft. That was why she was stuck at the level of Sword King. Those with a powerful lust for life were innately strong, no matter how physically weak or incapable of wielding a sword they might be. But those who had become strong could lose that driving force. That was why Ghislaine lost her way. She wasn't selfish enough. It wasn't as though the pupils before him were especially gifted. It was their obscene greed that made them strong. The insatiable appetite of a pair that lived on a life-or-death battlefield. Hey, come at me already. Defeat me, then battle each other to the death, so one of you can call yourself the sword god. You'll have enough money to play around for 100 lifetimes. You'll be able to line up women, from slave girls to princesses, and have your way with them. Your name alone will bring people to their knees in fear. One step forward and crowds of people will part to make way for you. I didn't start learning the sword for something like that. Master, please don't insult us like that. This was it. They were going to learn to be more honest with themselves. For if they did, they would easily be able to crush someone like him and call themselves sword gods. The sword god Galfalion had already forgotten about the southern sky. Somewhere in the demon continent T, he great emperor of the demon world, Kishirisu, gazed up at the eastern sky. Humph, when you become as great as I am, you can see things even if you face the opposite direction. How's that? Amazing, isn't it? There was no one there to answer her. Not a single person was present. So you're ignoring me. Mwahaha. Very well, very well. I'll forgive you humans. Or rather, no one will come near me because of the peace treaty, so I have no choice but to forgive you. Mwahaha, mwahaha, mwaha. Gurg. Kishirika was lonely. The moment she had revived from death, she had cried out, I, the demon world's great emperor Kishirika, have revived. I must have kept you all waiting. Mwahaha. But no one was there. She decided she would go to the city and repeat her declaration, only for people to look at her as if she were a pitiful child. Since then, no one paid her any attention. She tried visiting one of her old friends, but they simply told her, things are peaceful right now, so behave yourself. What are those human diviners even doing? When I revived in the past, they would start trembling in sudden fear, babble weird things, then leap from their windows. Without that opening act, it feels like there's no value to my revival. Honestly, youngsters these days. She kicked at a stone and looked up at the magic pooling in the western sky. Another name of the great emperor of the demon world was the demon emperor of demon eyes. She possessed more than 10, and in a single glance she could tell what was happening, no matter how far away. With those eyes she saw powerful mana, the familiar light of summoning magic, and the person controlling it. Or at least, she should have been able to. What's this? I can't see the one doing this. I wonder if there's a barrier. You must be a shy one, hiding your face after causing such mayhem. Kishirika's eyes were not all-powerful. That was why she was merely the great emperor of the demon world, and would never be called a demon god, no matter how much time passed. Not that she was particularly bothered by that. It'd be nice if they could at least summon a hero. But lately everyone is all Laplace this and Laplace that. Kishirika? Who's that? So it's not like it matters. I guess even heroes would rather go for young men with good looks like Laplace. I want some time in the spotlight too. I want to be showered with attention and put on parade. She sighed as she set out on her journey. A journey with no particular destination in mind. At the same time, Rudeus's perspective he went to a hill on the outskirts of the citadel of Roa. As I had promised on my birthday, I was going to show Ghislaine what Saint Tier water magic looked like. Eris, of course, tagged along. I took out Aqua Hirtia and removed the cloth I had wrapped around the crystal just in case. As awkward as it looked, it was better than showing off to potential thieves what an expensive item I had. I had wrapped it to look like a mana-filled cloth for amplifying the magic of the staff. It was at least better than people thinking I was hiding an enormous gem. I decided to test the staff with a practice shot before trying out Saint Tier water magic. I focused the same amount of mana I always did to create a water ball, but the result was immense, bigger than I'd ever seen it before. Whoa, this is huge. When I tried compressing the ball, it instead became so small that you couldn't even see it. I slowly made adjustments. After 30 minutes of testing things out, I figured out that this staff increased the effects of my water magic 5-fold. This meant my offensive magic was more potent, and I could produce the same power level with a reduced mana cost. To represent this with numbers, without the staff, mana cost 10, power 5 with the staff, mana cost 10, power 25 with the staff, mana cost 2, power 5, something like that. In other words, it worked like a magnifying glass or a microscope. Elaborate adjustments were difficult right now, but I would probably be fine once I got accustomed to using the staff. How is it? Eris had a nervous look on her face. Don't worry, I'm officially obsessed with my new toy, I thought. It's difficult to make adjustments, but it's really amazing. Oh really? I'm glad. I continued testing and discovered that fire magic was amplified 2-fold while earth and wind were each amplified thrice. Using the staff to combine different types of magic, however, seemed difficult. Or was that also a matter of getting used to it? Alright then, what you have all been waiting for. I, Rudeus Greyrat, will show you my great, all-powerful hidden technique. Yay! Eris clapped in joy. Ghislaine also seemed deeply interested. I was also feeling excited. Time to show them how cool I was. Waha! I raised my staff toward the sky as I chanted my Saint Tier water magic spell. Mana, gather to me. Magnificent spirit of water, lift to the heavens. Huh, that was when I noticed it. What's that? The other two followed my gaze and looked up as well. I don't know, but it's an incredible amount of mana. So she could see mana with that eye. After 3 years, I finally knew her true power, a demon eye. Ghislaine quickly replaced her eye patch. Shall we go back to the city for now? I didn't know what this abnormal sky heralded, but if something happened, I wanted to have a roof to take refuge under. We'd be in trouble if spears began raining upon us. No, the closer you get to the city, the more concentrated the mana. It might be better to distance ourselves instead. But we have to go back to the manor and warn everyone at least. Surely it would be better to inform Philip and the others and get the townspeople to safety. In that case, I'll go Rudeus. Duck. I crouched reflexively. Something whooshed by, slicing through the air at top speed, right where my head had been. A chill ran down my spine. What was that? What just happened? You. Beside me. Ghislaine put her hand on her sword, and her silhouette blurred. The next moment, she was in a pose as if she had just struck with her sword. She'd demonstrated this to me many times before. The sword god style Saint Tier technique, the long sword of light. A secret technique of the sword god style. It was said that if you performed it perfectly, the tip of your sword reached the speed of light. Ghislaine told me it was this technique that made sword god style the strongest of the 3 styles. Ghislaine's brows knitted. She must have missed her target. Her opponent dodged that death blow of an attack that was too fast to be seen with the naked eye. Ghislaine's face went hard with caution as she glared at something behind me. I slowly turned around to see who had tried to attack me and dodged Ghislaine's counter-slash. Who? A man stood there. He had blonde hair and was wearing something that looked like a pure white school uniform, fastened in the front. He probably had a handsome face, but it was hidden behind a yellow mask that looked like a fox. In his right hand was a dagger. That must have been it. That was what came from my head. Who are you? Tell us your name. The moment after Ghislaine shouted, his face gleamed. It was a brilliant light, so bright it blinded us all for a moment. I immediately shut my eyes. Gah! I heard Ghislaine howl. Then a clang as metal clashed against metal. Then the sound of rapid movement. Their blades met, twice, then a third time. By the time my vision recovered, Ghislaine was in front of me with her eye patch pulled back. So that was how she did it. The moment that light took our vision, she pulled her eye patch aside so she could see with her other eye. Bastard, who are you? Are you an enemy of the Greyrat family? Aramanthi the Bright. That is my name. Aramanthi. I came to put a stop to this strange phenomenon, on Lord Perugius' orders. Perugius. Now that was a name I had heard before. One of the 3 legendary heroes who slew the demon god, and one of the survivors of that battle. A summoner with 12 familiars. Then, like a chain reaction, I remembered the name Aramanthi. He was one of those 12 familiars. Aramanthi the Bright. Be careful, Ghislaine. According to the literature I read, this guy can move at the speed of light. Rudeus, take the young mistress and fall back. Just as Ghislaine asked, I used my back as a shield and escorted Eris a safe distance away so we wouldn't be embroiled in the battle. I was careful not to go too far, staying within Ghislaine's protective reach. If that really were Arimanfi the Bright, a sword couldn't touch him. I was sure I'd read something like that in the legend of Perugius. That said, where had he come from? No, wait. Arimanfi the Bright was said to be the governing spirit of light. It was said that he could travel any distance instantaneously if it were within line of sight. Back when I read that, I thought it was a load of rubbish, but he had appeared behind me in the blink of an eye. Ghislaine would never let her guard down, and he had no reason to be lurking in this area beforehand. He must have flown here at the literal speed of light. That was one of his abilities after all. Woman, move. This strange occurrence might cease if I slay that boy. Wait, what was he talking about? Strange occurrence. Did he mean that thing in the sky? What kind of misunderstanding was he under? I am the Sword King Ghislaine de Doldia. That thing in the sky has nothing to do with us. Withdraw, Sword King. How can I believe that? Show me proof. Look, this is one of the famous blades of the 7 original sword gods, Hiramion, flat core. Will you still not believe after seeing it? She thrust her sword toward Arimanfi while still gripping it firmly by the hilt. I didn't know her sword had that kind of inscription on it. Flat core. Core as in chest. Certainly not a word I'd associate with Ghislaine's chest. Swear on the names of your master and your household. I swear on the name of my master, sword god Galfalion, and the honor of the Dodoldia people. Dodoldia, was it? Very well. If we later discover you're not as innocent as you claim, Lord Perugius will decide your fate. Fine with me. Arimanfi stowed his dagger. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but the issue was apparently settled. To me, it seemed obvious that swearing something was true didn't mean someone was being honest, but apparently that was how things worked in this world. That said, did swearing on the names of those people really lend her words that much credibility? The same level as, say, the Roman Catholic Pope swearing on the name of God? It's fine, as long as you aren't the ones responsible. And you won't even apologize for attacking us out of nowhere. It was your fault for doing something suspicious here, he said, turning on his heel. Let's just calm down and think about this rationally, I thought. First, something strange was happening in the sky. Then this guy showed up, the familiar of a legendary and storied hero. This person of legend attacked me. He thought I was the one who caused the phenomenon in the sky. That wasn't true, of course, but maybe he knew something about what was going on up there? No, he couldn't have, or he wouldn't have attacked me in the first place. I started to say. Right as I called out to Arimanfi, the sky turned white and a finger of light sped toward the ground. The instant it reached the earth, the light ballooned at incredible speed, violently swallowing everything in its path like a tidal wave. The manor, the city, the citadel, the flowers, and the trees. Everything was devoured as it expanded. As soon as Arimanfi saw what was happening, he disappeared in a burst of gold light. Ghislaine ran toward us, but was swallowed before she could reach us. Eris froze in confusion, and I wrapped my body around hers to shield her. That was the day the Fitoa region vanished. Epilogue IT was 6 months after the Fitoa region vanished. Roxy had finally reached the area, only to be greeted by nothing but grass-covered plains. She took in the sight wide-eyed and dumbfounded. She was standing on the main highway, a stone-paved road. No other country had a road so magnificent that far from its capital. Azura Kingdom had developed it and laid it out, stretching from one end of the kingdom to the other. But that was how the road had been when she last traversed it. Now it was gone, abruptly cut off in front of her. There was nothing else as far as the eye could see. Nothing but grass, spread far and wide. Something had happened. She knew that, but she wasn't sure what. All she knew was that the Fitoa region had disappeared, Buena village was gone, and Rudeus, his kind family who had accepted her despite her race, and everyone else, had disappeared. Roxy caught wind of the story several times during her journey here. She was sure it couldn't be true, sure that people were just trying to deceive her. At any rate, she chose not to believe what she heard. She believed that Rudeus and his family were definitely alive. They were just fine and nothing had happened to them. She staked everything on that one sliver of hope. At least until now, when she finally saw the reality spread out before her. Roxy's knees gave out from under her. So, you lost someone too? The driver of the coach she took said from behind her. An exceptional apprentice, she answered. An apprentice, huh? Being a magician's apprentice. He must have been prepared for the possibility of losing his life anyway, yeah? He was only 10. Well, that is too soon. He patted her on the shoulder, as if to soothe her. For a while, Roxy could do nothing but stare at the earth at her feet. She didn't want to think about anything. She couldn't. She wasn't even sure what she should do from here. The driver watched her silently before he spoke again, his words measured. Actually, there's a Fitoa region refugee camp. Want to go see? Well, it'd be difficult for a 10-year-old kid to survive what happened, but you never know. Roxy's head jerked up. I'll go. This was Rudeus after all. Surely he was all right. No doubt he'd used his quick wits to survive. He was surely in perfect health, living in that settlement. Once again, she clutched firmly at a sliver of hope. The refugee camp comprised numerous wooden buildings and was roughly the size of a village. A great number of people bustled about. They were anything but carefree. A dark, heavy mood hung over them. I never thought I would see something like this in Azura Kingdom, Roxy thought. The Azura Kingdom Roxy knew was the wealthiest country in the world. The people there had faces full of optimism, and there were smiles everywhere you looked. Food was plentiful and monsters were few. It was the easiest place to live. There were no smiles to be found here. The settlement didn't seem to lack for food. This was a fairly bountiful area. They wouldn't starve, not so long as they could pull up the grass and eat it. As long as they weren't in danger of starving, they should have been smiling. Even if a disaster had taken place, things weren't nearly as dire as they were on the demon continent. Or so she thought, but she couldn't help frowning at the sight before her. The refugee camp had a temporary adventurers guild. It was there, in front of the bulletin board that normally had various requests pinned to it, that the melancholy dwelled the thickest. A man who had lost his house and family stood there wailing. What the hell is this? 6 whole months. It took 6 whole months for me to get back here. Damn it. Laura, Francis, why are all of you dead? He lost his family, and not just them, but his house, his land, the tools of his trade, everything he had. His heart-wrenching screams were difficult to hear, but no one could stop him from lamenting. God, is this all your fault? A priest threw the tools of his trade, the symbol of a Millis religious organization, onto the ground. I won't believe anymore. You're not gods, you just ridicule and kill us. You're cruel demons. Face full of hatred, he looked up at the heavens and cursed. There were other Millis believers present, but none of them were praying to the gods. A merchant was trying to slit his own throat, only to be stopped by the people around him. Don't stop me. Hey, knock it off. What good does dying do? Good things can still happen to you if you're alive. If I live. Do you seriously believe that? Damn it. I lost something more important than my own life. Please, just let me die. Damn it, damn it, damn it. The man squatted and began crying, his face contorted in despair. His entire body trembled. This was a horrible place. Everyone's faces were grief-stricken. Roxy had never known a place so dominated by sadness before. She had watched many people die, had even escaped scenes of carnage herself numerous times. This was the first time she had ever seen a place of such pure anguish. This might be a pointless endeavor, she thought. Pulled in by the heavy atmosphere, she felt close to tears, but she pressed on and began her hunt for information. An hour passed. Roxy learned the gist of what happened. After the sky turned strange, a large-scale mana calamity occurred over the Fitoa region. It was not an explosion exactly, but it did spread far and wide. Everything in the Fitoa region was enveloped by it, and teleported randomly to locations all over the world. The buildings and trees disappeared entirely, scattering only the people that had been there. Some of them had managed to return to the region, but realized nothing was left of their hometowns and lost all hope. Truly terrible, Roxy muttered as she looked at the bulletin board. There were rows of names listed as either deceased or missing. Posted beside them were messages to family members and requests such as, if you see this person in your travels, please bring them here. The most eye-catching part of the notice board was a request that was pinned under the name of Fitoa's liege lord, asking for information on the missing and deceased, an unprecedented number of people. As an adventurer, Roxy had done her fair share of work. Never in her life had she seen a bulletin board this full of requests, nor one that was so desperate and so heart-wrenching. It was clear just how widespread the damage of this calamity really was. Perhaps she had run across someone on the list of the deceased and the missing on the way here. She heard rumors about people suddenly reappearing. Of course, she hadn't paid it any mind at the time. There was always idle gossip like that. If only she could remember something, she might be of some help to the people here. No. She shook her head, stopping her train of thought right there. She'd taken the biggest highway across the central continent to get here. Any information she had, someone else had probably already reported by now. Roxy instead turned her gaze to the list of the deceased and began going through the names in order. Despite the scale of the disaster, the list of deceased was relatively short, and she didn't recognize any of the names. By comparison, the list of missing people was so long it was painful to look at. It made sense given they had all been transported elsewhere. Surely some of them had been attacked and killed by monsters, leaving behind no remains by which to identify them. There were many places that could kill one instantly: mountaintops, mid-air, or in the sea. It was incredible that some of the deaths were even confirmed. There it is. Roxy furrowed her brows. She found the names of Rudeus and the others in the missing persons column. Rudeus Greyrat, Zenith Greyrat, Lilia Greyrat, Aisha Greyrat. She knew that Lilia had become one of Paul's wives. Rudeus had written as much in one of his letters. Paul and Norn's names had a line drawn through them. She took another look at the list of deceased just in case. They weren't there. That meant they had to be alive. Then again, it could have also meant there was no information on them. A short-lived moment of relief. At least I can rejoice in the fact that they're not dead for now. Absent-mindedly, she looked over the message board again. The desperation of the writers was so clear. Roxy wondered if her own parents were doing well back home. Quite some time had passed since she fought with them and left her village. Until recently, she hadn't paid much attention to the flow of time, in part because she was a member of the Migurd race. The months passed quickly. Perhaps she should at least send a letter. She found a message on the board. The writer was Paul Greyrat. To Rudeus, Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha are missing. Norn is safe in my custody. I don't know where you are right now, but I'm sure that even if you're alone, you'll make it back here. So I'll search for you last. For now, I'm headed to Millis continent. That's where Zenith was born and raised. I've sent a message to Lilia's hometown and house as well. I want you to search the northern part of the central continent. If you find any of them, contact me with the info below. Zenith, Lilia, if either of you see this, please contact me as well. For anyone that might know me or my family, or former members of the Fong of the Black Wolf, please help me search. I'm sure the members of the Fong of the Black Wolf may have mixed feelings about me. I won't ask you to sweep it under the rug. You can scream at me all you want. If you ask me to lick your boots, I'll do it. All my assets are gone, so I can't pay you, but please, help me search for my family. Contact information, Millis Continent, Holy Country of Millis's capital Militian, Adventurers Guild. Party name, Search Squadron for Buena Village Residents. Clan name, Roa Region's Search for Missing Persons Association. From Paul Greyrat. Paul was alive. Knowing that brought her relief. Rudeus had griped about Paul in his letters, but it seemed Paul was especially reliable in situations like this. Roxy stopped to think. The best course of action would be to help with the search. She was indebted to their family after all. Even now she thought fondly of the 2 years she spent with them, for many reasons. She was more than willing to help. All right, let's do this, she decided. The moment she made up her mind, her thoughts started churning. But who should I search for, and how? Fong of the Black Wolf was likely the name of Paul's adventuring party. Those people probably weren't acquainted with Rudeus, or Lilia, for that matter. But since Paul had left Rudeus for last, she decided to search for him instead. It seemed Paul thought Rudeus would return to Fitoa, but that boy was highly adaptable. It was just as likely that he would settle in whatever place he had been teleported off to. If that were the case, she needed to tell him what had happened and bring him back. I'll search for Rudeus then. Now, where to start? Paul had gone to the capital of the Holy Millis country. That meant he probably left similar messages along the way, specifically in 3 places: the Azura Kingdom's borders, the Dragon King Kingdom's eastern port, and the Holy Country of Millis's western port. In that case, she should search beyond those places. That would be the northern part of the central continent, the Begarit continent, and the Demon continent. One of those 3. She had never been to Begarit before, but she heard it was full of labyrinths and monsters. And while she had some familiarity with the geography of the Demon continent, it was dangerous to journey there alone. If she wanted a safe route, then the northern region would be the best. But that was exactly why she had to go to one of the other 2. She could find a party and journey to one of those 2 regions instead. Good. Now that she had made up her mind, there was no point in lingering here. She would head for the Dragon King's eastern port. From there, she would look for a party heading for either the Begarit continent or the Demon continent. Once that was settled, Roxy moved swiftly. She finished the preparations for her journey and set out from the refugee camp. Strangely, just getting a move on was enough to lift the veil of sadness. Not just that, but her belief that Rudeus was still alive strengthened with each step. I want to sit at the table with all of them again, even just once more, she thought as her feet took her south. That was the beginning of Roxy Migurdia's long journey. Extra chapter: the forest goddess directly east of Azura Kingdom and just over the mountains, right in the middle of the central continent, was a sphere of many tiny nations fighting each other for dominion over the region. This place, where countries were built only to meet their demise shortly thereafter and be rebuilt once more, was called the Conflict Zone by the locals. One of the small countries in the Conflict Zone was the Markian mercenary country. Established by the great mercenary whose name it bore, it became a warlike nation that based its economy on dispatching mercenaries to neighboring countries. There was a pub nestled in one of Markian's corners. There, one mercenary was bragging to another about one of the scars atop his shoulder. Look at this scar. I got this during the defense of Rudeman. Oh, that battle. That was hard fought, huh? Where were you stationed? Aru's Fort's eastern gate. That place was hell. I was damn close to losing my wonderful, beloved right arm here. Hell, doesn't even begin to describe what happened there. I heard you guys were flanked and had your forces devastated. Not much different from what happened to you guys in the defensive battle of Rudeman. I heard you guys had your supply routes cut off, so you didn't even have food. The Markian mercenary country supported all other nations equally and without discrimination. The mercenaries they dispatched were incredibly feared. Their troops were great warriors, their commanders calm and collected, and their tacticians excelled at military tactics. Once they entered battle, they led their allies to victory without fail. They were a symbol of triumph and fear on the battlefield. That was what it meant to be a Markian mercenary. It's incredible we made it out of there alive. Well, that's what you call the grace of the forest goddess. One of the mercenaries retrieved a pendant from his breast pocket. There was a relief carved into the wood, the profile of a woman with animal-like ears. Seeing this, the other mercenary unsheathed the short sword at his side. The blade was dyed red with paint. Then a toast to the forest goddess Lane. May we be the victors in the coming battles as well. Cheers. With their items in one hand and wine cups in the other, the two mercenaries drank every last drop of alcohol. That was their way of praying. Ah, that's some good stuff. Yeah, gotta have some alcohol after battle. Markian stuff is the best around. And women too. Shall we hit up the brothel after this then? Let's keep that part a secret from the goddess. Ahaha. The night wore on as the two merrily shared drinks. The forest goddess Lane was the god of the Markian mercenaries. According to legend, she was the goddess of salvation who appeared 100 years ago when the Markian mercenary country was on the verge of collapse. Her guidance of one of the country's legendary commander-in-chiefs rescued the country from disaster. Thanks to that legend, many of Markian's mercenaries believed that when they were on the verge of death, the forest goddess would appear out of nowhere and save them. That was why they prayed to her. However, strangely enough, there was only one country in the entire world that believed in the forest goddess Lane, and that was the Markian mercenary country. Why was it only this particular country that had such a custom? The answer was one interesting story indeed. Year 417 of the Armored Dragon. It was the year of the displacement incident in Azura Kingdom. Not 2 years had passed since the mercenary king Markian proclaimed the establishment of the fledgling Markian mercenary country. The country was on the verge of collapse and facing a crisis. This wasn't a rare occurrence. In the conflict zone, small countries were established and destroyed all the time. People would wait for an opportune chance to build their own country, with the ambition of taking over the whole region and creating an even greater country, only for that dream to be shattered and fragmented. Markian mercenary country was just another casualty of that cycle, a disorganized nation about to meet the same fate. Nothing more, nothing less. Still, nothing happened without a cause. Their first step down the path of their destruction was diplomacy. The country, whose economy was based around deploying mercenaries, possessed a national and military power beyond what was expected of a developing country. Yet that was the very cause of their problem. The two countries in closest contact to Markian, Dekuto Kingdom and the Bros Empire, were deeply wary of the mercenary country. They schemed against it, and when diplomatic relations broke down, both countries proclaimed war upon Markian simultaneously. Although it was a mercenary country, it was powerless against the combined might of two other nations. Markian made a show of fierce resistance, but it lost half its territory after the sudden surrender of an important fortress and the loss of numerous large battles. There was no future for the country. Those mercenaries who thought as much fled to other countries or turned traitor. What was to become the decisive battle, which would afterward become known as the site of Markian's final battle, took place in a large basin. Markian gathered its military strength and took position against the two allied countries. Up till that point, the two countries had launched their attacks separately, but the basin was an important landmark with forests infested with monsters on either side. This restricted their ability to maneuver through it. They had to band together. That was also why the basin was such a key point. Once Markian fell, the other two countries would need to control this point to seize power over the area around the capital. Additionally, once that was over, it was easy to imagine the conflict that would then break out between the Dekuto Kingdom and the Bros Empire. Markian had already tried to capitalize on the fraught nature of the relationship between those two countries, but their military strength was reduced to the point where they had little ability to put up any meaningful opposition. They had their hands full just trying to keep the country from collapsing. Begot Mercenal, the captain of the 3rd unit of Markian's mercenary company, led 10 of his men into the depths of the forest. Aegean Forest, as it was called, was infested with monsters. Since time immemorial, the ruler of this area had forbidden passage through it, or so those who lived nearby unanimously declared. Woodcutters even refused to enter Aegean Forest. This meant passing through with troops was impossible. Even in the current battle, Markian's two enemy countries avoided approaching the forest. King Markian decided to take advantage of that. Their troops would break through the forest and launch a surprise attack on one of their two enemies. A simple but effective plan. That said, Markian's military strength was not what it used to be. Just the act of invading the forest would reduce their numbers greatly when they were accosted by various beasts. Forget launching a strong surprise attack. It seemed they would only be squandering resources. That was where their strategy came into play. In the previous battle, they had secured several Bros Empire suits of armor. They would have some of their soldiers don these, then attack the Dekuto Empire from behind. The two countries had formed a temporary alliance until Markian was vanquished. Once that was over, the two would inevitably begin fighting for control over the land they had conquered. Even now, tensions ran high as both countries began, considering what methods would be most beneficial to them. It would only take one small push for their alliance to snap, creating conflict between them. That was Markian's aim. Bigot Mercenal, known for being daring and resolute, was put in charge of the operation. He would pass through the forest and launch a powerful sneak attack with a small company of mercenaries. It was an incredibly dangerous endeavor. They would not come back alive even if they succeeded. In fact, they might have to take their own lives to avoid capture. They couldn't bring anything that may give away their identity. No one could know who they were or where they came from. There was no honor to be had from this mission. Instead, they would die as traitors. Despite that, Bigot said to Markian, "Do not worry, for tales of us shall be passed on. We will live on as the heroes that led this country to victory during one of its great battles, just like the legendary twin gods Migas and Gumis." Is that not an honor by itself? Bigot took on this duty, seeing the similarity between himself and the legendary heroes of 400 years ago who died in battle against Laplace. He had 10 men under his command. 3 were intermediate-tier North God-style sword fighters, while the other 7 were mercenaries unassociated with the 3 sword styles. Bigot himself was an advanced-tier sword God-style swordsman, but their group had no healer and none among them were particularly skilled. In these parts, magicians were valuable assets to parties, but since they were preparing for the final battle, Markian couldn't afford to assign any to a team of throwaway pawns. True victory meant the country had to both trigger warfare between its enemies, then capitalize on that opportunity and come out triumphant. Humph, never thought I would be doing something like this, Bigot thought, laughing in self-derision. Bigot was destined to be a mercenary. He was born into a mercenary band. His father died in battle while his mother was pregnant with him, and his mother died in battle not long after he was born. He was sold as a slave and bought by what would eventually become the Markian Mercenary Company. That was where he learned about swordplay and battle. Ever since then, he had lived only for money and survival. He never dreamed that at the end of it all, he would be battling for honor. As if I'm a knight from some kingdom, he thought. Everyone knew knights were the only ones who died for honor. But then it occurred to Bigot. Maybe I am a knight of Markian. It made him proud to think that way. For the longest time, he hadn't belonged anywhere. It was only through great hardship that he had come to be able to call Markian his home. Now he would fight to protect it. He'd mocked those ideals in the past for being sappy, but now that he was in a similar position, they didn't seem so bad after all. Commander, just a little farther. Don't let your guard down. Now that we've come this far, we don't want to be killed by humans. Haha, true enough. Until that point, they had encountered few monsters. They had been walking the entire day and only had 2 run-ins. It was like a miracle. Despite that, he had lost one of his men. They had been moving as carefully as possible, but hidden in the overgrowth was a red-leaf tiger. It attacked, unseen, and 1 soldier died. But the beast was already heavily injured and seemed to be running from someone. The red-leaf tiger was the most fearsome of the beasts in this forest. Just who in the world could have done that? Could it be the person who rules over this forest? Bigot wondered. He had heard rumors of the forest's ruler before. Corintosaurus, an A-class beast with a giant, lizard-like body over 5 meters in length. He didn't know if it really existed or not, but if it did, it would surely be capable of leaving a B-class red-leaf tiger in critical condition. That also meant that if they were attacked by such a creature, neither he nor his 9 remaining men would get out unscathed. So he pressed on even more cautiously than before. Fortunately, he had experience maneuvering through a forest, enough to avoid encountering any monsters. If he happened to encounter any, he at least had the strength to kill it before it called for help. So long as they managed that, they would be fine. Sadly, Bigot and his men weren't the only ones who thought so. What? Huh. Before Bigot realized what was happening, he and his men had run into another group. This party numbered 10 as well. Together, they made a group of 20 men, all of them clad in armor of the Bros Empire. The only difference was that Bigot and his men were fakes. You there, give us the name of your unit. A man clad in lustrous, striking armor stood before Bigot, demanding he identify himself. Draw your swords. Let none return alive. Bigot ignored the question and instead shouted at his men, who drew their swords and leaped at the enemy. Deserters, huh? The Bros Empire commander labeled them thus after they launched their attack. He was mistaken, but that didn't change what had to be done. Kill them. Bros doesn't need cowards who run from battle. The Bros soldiers were swift. Gah! Damn it. In the blink of an eye, 2 of Bigot's men had been cut down. In mere moments they were on the defensive. The Bros Empire soldiers were incredibly skilled. He didn't know it at the time, but they were actually fighting against the Emperor's personal bodyguards. What were bodyguards doing here in the forest, away from the Emperor? It was because of something that happened an hour ago. The Bros Emperor was personally walking through their military camp to inspire his soldiers when a beast suddenly sprang out of the forest and attacked. The creature was quickly dispatched, but the Emperor sustained a small scratch from the struggle and was given medical treatment afterward. Still, the fact remained that he had been attacked right before his soldiers' very eyes. Sensing a drop in morale, the Emperor ordered his bodyguards to march. "Go forth and fetch the hide of a great, fierce beast," he commanded. Then he could claim that he fought the felled creature, and that was how he had sustained such a wound. The bodyguards immediately set out into the forest. Mysteriously enough, they didn't encounter any beasts, but instead came upon Bigot and his party. Why here? The strongest of Bigot's men was easily slain by the Bros' bodyguards. "I'm sure you already know, but I am the captain of the Emperor's Guard, Klein Dinoltus. Water St. Klein. Do you seriously think you can win? Damn it. Cease your resistance and surrender. Then you may at least have your lives." Bigot panicked. There was no way they could surrender. If they were caught and investigated, they would be exposed as pretenders. Markian would fall. After that, the Bros Empire and Dakuto Kingdom would fight. He didn't know who would win, but either way the country he had such fond memories of would disappear. On the other hand, he had no other options. They were clearly outmatched, and if this continued any longer, their destruction would be inevitable. "I'm sorry, Markian." Bigot apologized to the comrades he held in esteem within his heart. That was when it happened. Grag, a gigantic lizard came flying at them. Its body, all 5 meters of it, was a vivid green, and its majestic form was riddled with open wounds, blood pouring out of them. Red bubbles came foaming out of its mouth as it moved between the two opposing groups and collapsed. Then, just a moment after that, a wild beast came leaping out after it. This beast let out a fierce war cry as it landed upon the lizard's head and drove its sword through it. The lizard let out a final, anguished cry before it died. Gah! There was no time for them to process what had just happened. Even after slaying the lizard, the wild beast didn't stop moving. It sprang to the ground and, in the blink of an eye, cut down 2 of the Emperor's bodyguards. "What are you doing?" For a moment Bigot thought this had to be the ruler of the forest. However, this wild beast had the form of a human. Warm brown skin, fiery red hair, and 2 fully erect beast-folk ears. It also held a sword that had a thin, one-sided blade, which gleamed an eerie red color, and had an inscription on it. "Who are you?" yelled Klein, the captain of the bodyguards, as he stepped forward. Growling, the beast didn't answer. It merely responded to the presence of an enemy wielding a sword in front of it. Fight back." With a battle cry, the beast slashed at Klein. Klein was a water saint. The water god style was a school of swordplay that allowed one to fend off any attack and launch a deadly counter in return. At least, that was supposed to be the case. The long sword of light. So this is the sword god style. When the beast's sword met Klein's blade broke in 2. Then a split formed in Klein's armor as the attack sundered his clothing, skin, muscle, and finally bone in succession. That was when Klein's lower and upper half separated. The Bros' bodyguards didn't even flinch as their commander's torso fell in front of them with a wet thud. "How dare you? Our commander! We'll avenge him." They were all sword fighters of intermediate tier in either the water god or sword god style. They were undeniably strong. And yet, the beast howled. With each swing of its blood-red blade, one by one those men were vivisected. The beast moved like a flash of light. Its voice was enough to make one recoil. No one was any match for it. In moments, the entire guard was wiped out. Bigot and his men couldn't even move. They had no idea what had just happened. The beast had appeared out of nowhere and, in an overwhelming show of strength, destroyed everything in its path. But why? For what purpose? Growling, it was looking their way. Reason had fled from its eyes that now fixated on Bigot and his men, full of bloodlust, amplifying their fear. The clothes it wore were revealing, but terror overwhelmed any sense of attraction they may have felt. That was right. This beast was a woman. It had a woman's form. As soon as he realized that, the gears turned in the back of Bigot's mind. It was the story of the sword saint that taught him swordplay. That sword saint was a just and honorable warrior of the sword god style who had trained in the holy land of swords. They wouldn't tell him why they decided to become a mercenary, but they did talk about their prior training experience. One of the other people there was violent, wouldn't listen to anyone. She was almost like a mad dog. She surpassed me and became a sword king, but she wasn't a bad person, just an idiot. Everyone hated her because she lost control in extreme situations and went mad, attacking everyone, whether they be friend or foe. The sword fighter in that tale was the woman in front of him now. That description fit exactly. By any chance, he called out to her as he slipped into the god sword style bow his teacher had taught him, bending to one knee and tucking his head forward, showing respect and submission. "Are you the sword king, Lady Ghislaine de Doldia?" The moment he said that the beast stilled. After a short time, Ghislaine regained her sense of reason. I have often heard rumors, but I never dreamed I would meet you in a place like this. She didn't respond to his words. Instead, she glared at him with her bloodshot eyes and questioned him very matter-of-factly. You there, have you seen a girl around 12 years old with pure red hair? Or a boy of about 10 who's a proficient mage? No, I haven't. He shook his head, thinking her words over. A red-haired girl of approximately 12. A magician boy of approximately 10. He had seen many slaves like that in his life, but none of them around this area. Besides, this was the Aegean forest. It was a place filled with beasts. Why did she think there would be children in a place like this? I see. Sorry to get in your way. Ghislaine began walking away. After a few steps, she suddenly stopped and looked back, her head cocked. By the way, where is this? Bigot, too, cocked his head. He told her she was in the conflict zone, located on the northernmost part of the southern half of the central continent. He then explained they were in a forest within the northern part of Marchian mercenary country. Bigot and his men were in the middle of an operation. They didn't really have the luxury of time to explain, but she had just spared their lives, and if they upset her, they might be next. This was his attempt at crisis management. Impossible. Ghislaine was in disbelief. She didn't understand how she had ended up here. Bigot asked for the details of her situation. She had been acting as the bodyguard for a young girl in Azura Kingdom's Fitoa region when they were attacked. Before she knew what was happening, she had been swallowed by some light and had ended up in this forest. As she fought hordes of monsters, she lost herself to the excitement of battle and turned into a berserker that killed anything that came near her. In any case, this is the conflict zone's Marchian mercenary country. Make no mistake about it. So it is. Ghislaine stopped to think. Bigot had no idea what she was thinking about. After 5 long seconds, she finally looked up at the sky. Then I have to go south to return to Azura. Using the sun to guide her, she turned straight south. That was the same direction that Bigot and his men were heading. Please wait. There's an enemy camp set up in that direction. And what about it? What about it? I mean, what are you planning to do? Anyone who gets in my way gets cut down. That's all. There was a ferocity in her eyes that made him doubt if she was still in possession of reason. Bigot had no words. Just what had her so stirred up. Hopefully Rudeus is with Lady Eris, but there's a chance they were both transported somewhere else just like I was. I have to hurry. After hearing that, he understood. We're not that different, he thought. Those 2 children, particularly the red-haired girl, were more important than anything to the Sword King. She was desperate to protect that which was precious to her. In that case, why don't we travel part of the way together? We also have something to take care of in that direction. Very well. For some reason Bigot felt particularly proud. Although their objectives differed, he felt like he was standing side by side with this Sword King, fighting for something he wanted to protect. Bigot, his men, and Ghislaine slipped out from the forest and attacked the Dekuto Kingdom from behind. Their luck was good. As soon as the battle with Marchian began, all the troops were focused on what was in front of them. The Bros Emperor found it suspicious that his bodyguards had failed to return. He suspected the Dekuto Kingdom was planning an ambush for his troops, and that his bodyguards had been killed after discovering their plot. After all, the Dekuto King's main army was close to the forest. It seemed likely they had troops hiding further within. In truth, the Dekuto King was a coward and had camped with his back to the forest so he wouldn't be caught in a surprise attack by the Bros Empire. The combination of these factors would later lead to Bigot's success. Ghislaine howled and Bigot let out a fierce cry as he led his men into battle. They charged right into the enemy camp where the Dekuto King's tent was set up. The king was startled by their surprise attack. Seeing their armor, he immediately thought the Bros Emperor had launched a sneak attack from the forest. He hailed a nearby attendant and commanded an assault on the Bros Empire. Then he tried to take shelter from the chaos. It was only 10 seconds later when Ghislaine tore the Dekuto King asunder with her blade, killing him. If he had lived, he might have realized Bigot and his men were not of the Bros Empire and retracted his orders, but an imperial edict had absolute power. The Dekuto Kingdom surged into battle against the Bros Empire. The Bros Empire had predicted such an attack would come, so while they were caught off guard by its timing, they were able to put up a fight. That was when the Marchian mercenary country took up arms. It was a 3-pronged free-for-all. Bigot found himself surrounded by enemies, but he was still alive. It was his mission to die deceiving the Dekuto Kingdom into thinking his attack was the work of the Bros Empire, yet still he clung to life. He and his men had already been separated, and the only ally close to him was a single fighter. There, right in front of him. He followed in the shadow of her tanned back as the light of her sword flashed, cutting through the enemy. He had never seen such a reliable figure before. He felt so proud to be protecting her flank. At last they could no longer see the armor of the Dekuto Kingdom around them. Instead, they were surrounded by soldiers of the Bros Empire. While the Empire was surprised by the intrusion of a woman with a blood-red blade, they had watched her cut down the Dekuto Kingdom's men and noticed Bigot protecting her flank in his Bros armor. They mistook Bigot and Ghislaine for allies. That was when Markian surged in. The two allied countries were shaken as the battle started up behind them. Not only had their bond alliance broken, but their formations as well. Markian, which should have been at a disadvantage, broke through their front lines. A chaotic battle ensued. Amidst the violent fighting, Bigot became separated from Ghislaine, but managed to rejoin his comrades. Shouts of joy rang out from the Markian mercenaries as they recognized Bigot and took up a firm position around him. Instead of falling back, Bigot remained on the front lines and kept fighting. The battle raged on, the soldiers covered in mud and blood, not fully aware of what was happening around them. Bigot took an arrow in his left eye. Anguished, he searched for the bowman responsible. That was when he saw it. He watched as it happened. Below an eye-catching banner, dressed in luxurious bronze armor, was a man with a black beard. Bigot saw the flash of red as that man, the Emperor of Bros, had his head sliced off by a brown-skinned woman. Ha ha ha. He laughed, and as he laughed, the battle wore on. And he lived. The final battle ended in victory for the Markian mercenary country. Thanks to his achievements, Bigot Mercenal earned the position of general. He was celebrated as a legendary hero for having succeeded in a suicide mission and for executing Dekuto's king. After that, Bigot Mercenal continued to do spectacular work that resulted in him being known as one of the most outstanding great generals of the Markian mercenary country. That, however, is a story for another time. Once that decisive battle was over, the great General Bigot started doing something strange. He started wearing a necklace that had the profile of a female beast folk chiseled into it, and began painting the blade of his sword red. It's a good luck charm. His men began to imitate him, and those who heard their tales followed suit. These customs continued spreading until they took their modern-day shape. When asked what kind of good luck charm it was, Bigot responded thus: "I was helped by a goddess during that battle. I'm following her example." It was from his words that the forest goddess Lane was created. The name Ghislaine was difficult for those in the southern part of the central continent to pronounce, and so her name, altered by their accents, became Lane. She appeared from the forest, rescuing the life of the great general, becoming the goddess of salvation. Forest goddess Lane. For the next 100 years, she was worshipped as Markian's goddess of protection, providing support to the hearts of many soldiers. Of course, the real Ghislaine had no knowledge of this designation. Where did Ghislaine go after that? Was she still alive? Did she survive that battle and go on home to Azura Kingdom? Was she able to meet that precious young mistress of hers again? Bigot Mercenal had no way of knowing.